That's right, it's Maxnomic, our chair sponsor here in the SPL. And look, I've been away from the chair ad game for a little while, so allow me to bring it back. Remember way back when the chair ads first started? Started with poetry, crossword puzzles, things like that. So we're gonna rewind the clock here a little bit as I read you guys a sample from Dolson's own. When you and the gang, wow, I messed it up already. When you and the gang are gaming for hours, winning left and right and claiming all of the power. This is you and the gang, by the way. You need something comfy, a truly great seat. The Maxnomic SMITE chair is an absolute treat. So gather round. No, please do not flee, because the comfort of this chair will make you ask, is chair for me? That's right. That's the Maxnomic SMITE chair. That's a 10 out of 10 poem. I don't care what you're saying. I can't even see you, chat, but I imagine it's all great things. The Maxnomic SMITE chair. Now we'll get to see how to sit in a Maxnomic SMITE chair. Jordan, one of our amazing video editors and stage managers here for the day, showing you how it reclines. And I didn't even realize we could go that far back. You know, my bed is right behind where my chair is set up in my bedroom, so I've never really even gotten to work with it on that level. Part of me was hoping he would tip all the way back, but that's the stability of a Maxnomic SMITE chair right there. It won't tip under the full recline, I guess. Anyway, go to needforseat.com and use code SMITEMAX when you're buying your own Maxnomic SMITE chair. Happy to be back in the chair ad game, but I'm not alone here on the desk. Taco is with me, and she's now experienced her first chair ad with me on the desk. I hope you enjoyed it there, Taco. In game number one or set number one moving into set number two now.
I think next time you have to freestyle the poem.
Because I have my phone here that it's written on. You're saying I copped out by having it written down.
A little bit, you know, but I can appreciate a pre-made. You know, clearly some thought went into that Maxnomic. I mean, the chairs deserve it.
That's right. They're worthy of
for all of us. Right. So you have to support it with your grade A poetry.
That's right. And you know, I thought it was grade A, but maybe more free flowing next time. We'll do Maxnomic. A little bit of justice. Let's see how the standings look here. We're jumping over to Group B, and the J Dragons, unsurprisingly, 2-0 so far here in this group. And the next matchup we'll have is the Oni Warriors versus the Camelot Kings. This one very important. And the Solar Scarabs still searching for that first win here in this group. So, Taco, this one becomes very interesting, the Oni Warriors versus the Kings, because there's a world where if the Oni Warriors, a team technically lower in the standings than the Kings, grabs this win, the Kings will then eventually have to play the Scarabs on Sunday to make it through to the playoffs.
And again, on paper, it almost looks as though this should be clear-cut, direct, Camelot Kings all day long. But this Oni Warriors team, I think it's a very powerful roster. We haven't really seen as much success as I think that we would have expected with the Warriors, but that's not to say that they couldn't have it figured out, because I don't know what it is about the competitive environment, but there are just some pros, and I think that the Warriors is another one of those teams where when the games actually matter, that's when you can expect them to pop off. Yeah,
agreed. And it's a team that has needed a little bit of time to get things kind of going for themselves so far here in Phase 1. They had their first win in Group B against the Solar Scarabs, and the duo lane finally showed some serious strides, I think, from what we saw earlier on here in Phase 1. And specifically Vote, I think he played on her once, Chiron once, 7-3 in both of those games. And we'll need Vote to show up big today, especially going against Netrioid.
Vote is about as seasoned as they come at this point in the SPL, and it's not really a surprise to see him being one of the more outstanding members for this team. I like the fact that he's trying to clearly generate some solid aggression from that duo lane, and if he can continue to just play in sync with this Warriors team, because we have seen a little bit of scuffiness, I would say, throughout team fights. Even the team would attest to that. Dardis has been very vocal on socials about not being it's not that they're unhappy with winning, it's just that this is a team that has clearly struggled with just finding that cohesive moment.
How about Neilma as well? Because look, Neil, back-to-back world champion, right? I mean, the guy knows how to play on the biggest stage. This is a high-pressure game here for this team. What do you need to see from Neil today to give you some confidence? Playing alongside Vote, maybe specifically in the laning phase, rotating out as well. What are your expectations for Neil in this matchup?
I think for Neil, it's really just going to boil down to how much he's actually able to control the spacing throughout these team fights. One thing that has always been really impressive about him is how well he's able to elevate his Hunter throughout every single game that he plays.
Well, his Hunter is Vote, and Vote is the one who is joining us for the pregame interview prior to the matchup up against the Camelot Kings. Vote, first of all, thanks for sitting down with us prior to this big game. Look, you guys already 1-0 here in this group. A win over the Camelot Kings would in theory all but secure you, if not completely secure you, a spot in the Phase 1 playoffs. Is the team feeling any extra pressure with that much on the line?
Nah, I think we're feeling pretty relaxed, to be honest. Like, we're kind of like 99% guaranteed. Well, I think we're 100% guaranteed, actually, because Scar's lost both games and we beat them head-to-head. So I'm pretty sure we've qualified, so we're just like, taking these games to just learn, basically. If we win, if we get first seed, it's always nice to get a bye, you know.
Right. Yeah, the seeding, very important, especially going into the Phase 1 playoffs as well. Look, we talked a lot about you and Neil here in this duo lane. Talk to me a little bit about what it's like to go up against Netrioid and Genetics and what you and Neil are maybe expecting here in this game.
Well, last time you played them, they kind of just ran it down duo. I kind of got rammed like, super hard, so kind of hoping that doesn't happen again.
Fair enough. Vote, looking forward to a good game from yourself and the rest of the Warriors here today. Thanks for chatting with me, and best of luck.
Thanks.
And you heard it there. I mean, confidence from Vote for good reason. This is the team in their first game already in this group, had gotten themselves a win, so a little bit of cushioning there. We'll see if they can convert that comfort, that confidence, into a win against a very strong team, Taco, that is the Camelot Kings. And that duo lane has been playing pretty well for the Camelot Kings. The last time these two teams met, the Kings won in 2-0 fashion. And Netrioid, remember, the one member kind of supplanted from that Sanguine team last year, seemingly fit in very well with this squad.
Netrioid has definitely been making moves alongside of this Kings roster, and I think by far the most impressive part about him is just how seamlessly he was able to flow into this team, because it could take a while to adapt to somebody else's playstyle, much less an entire team's playstyle, because Netrioid, having spent so much time with that Leviathan's roster in the past, it's not that easy to just plug and play, but he's making it look that simple. And
there were some question marks, admittedly, I think, around Genetics and how he would mesh with Netrioid going into this year. I think Genetics has looked well, or looked pretty good here in their games. Chiron, 4 out of the last 5 games for Netrioid. On her was the 5th game there since our restart on June 3rd, and Chiron and On her was what Netrioid played up against the Oni Warriors. Do you imagine then, Taco, that Chiron suddenly becomes a target here against Netrioid and Picks and Bans?
Potentially, but at the same time, I do feel as though there are other gods currently in the competitive meta that might take a little bit more prevalence as far as that initial Picks Bans phase is concerned. Although if Chiron is left open, I would not be surprised in the slightest to see Kings opting for it early on. But the same could be said for the Warriors. Although we haven't really seen too much of the Chiron out of Vote, I think it would definitely be an interesting flavor pickup. And he's obviously a hunter who knows how to play aggressive. It's one of his favorite things to do. And knowing that this duo lane could definitely see some sparks.
And look, some teams have figured out how to play against that Chiron. Remember in the last 2 games we saw Netrioid playing Chiron against the Dragons. They lost 0-2 there in that set, and that was in Group B as well. So now the Camelot Kings at 0-1 in this group need to get some momentum going to avoid an all-important showdown with the Scarabs then on Sunday. I think the jungle matchup is going to be sneaky pretty important here in this matchup as well. Captain Twig up against Cuvo Fred Taco, I think will carry a lot of weight.
And this is a big set debut, I think, also for Cuvo, because as far as finding their footing is concerned, I would definitely attest more to the fact that Twig has seemed a lot more consistent this split, and even in the group stages showing, even though they haven't necessarily won out the entire way, it's definitely going to be tough stuff here for Cuvo, because Twig has definitely been on the up and up, and not only that, but Kings are not a team that really leave a whole lot of openings to look for picks. They are a team that loves playing together. They love just farming it out, waiting for those big late game team fights, and they're not going to look for picks unless they know that it's a guarantee.
Right, and Captain Twig likes the year-long Shen, played him a couple of times in the last couple of games. Naja, Fenrir, the likes of those kind of come to the forefront here. Ymir taken away, first and foremost overall. It's been such an interesting transition, hasn't it, from Season 7, where we're like wondering early on why Ymir is getting any sort of love at all, to now first ban-worthy, and we don't even bat an eye.
And it doesn't seem like Oni Warriors are planning on letting up anytime soon with that support focus. Both teams opting early on to try and take out some of those more aggressive frontliners, taking real note, I think, of what Genetics and Neilmal are able to bring to the table. But I do love the fact that Oni Warriors are clearly having a lot of respect for Genetics on the Ymir, on the Emoja. He's had fantastic showings anytime he's had those gods let through, and it makes total sense to me, but I am expecting maybe a little bit of a priority pick towards a solo laner, because a lot of goodies up for grabs. Kakolin, King Arthur, they've been some centerpieces in that solo lane.
Well, you're spot on there, Taco, and to put some stats behind it, Yemoja or Ymir has been 5 out of the last 6 games for Genetics. Only Fafnir played once in the last 6 games to kind of separate that out. So maybe that starts to come to mind here. Chiron locked in first overall for the Oni Warriors. We wondered where that priority would fall in picks and bans, and the Warriors comfortable taking that one first. And King Arthur Raw, a combo that the Camelot Kings have absolutely made work. They're now picks 1 and 2 here for the Kings. After what we saw Haddix do in our previous set, we knew King Arthur had that in him, right? But that was just that was that potential brought to life there in the previous set.
It could be gruesome. Whenever King Arthur is able to find that early snowball lead, he is not a solo laner that's going to give up that easily. And I think that's the most important part to keep in mind here for the Kings is I'm definitely anticipating a little bit of possible early game rotations out of this King Arthur to try and help mitigate some of that early game pressure that might fall into the Raw, because traditionally speaking, I think Raw might seem a little bit out of the loop here on this one, but if you've been following at all, Big Man Ting loves this pick.
Yeah, Big Man Tings played it in a third of his last 6 games, 2 out of 6 so far for BMT, and that's the combo that we know the Camelot Kings like to bring to the table here. Fenrir gets locked in, and Fenrir, I would say, has in the past been in that conversation of kind of niche pick. I think PBM played him a few times over in Season 7, but started to work its way into the meta as a truly viable early game aggression style pick.
I think the idea here for the Oni Warriors is just find something that can stick to that Raw early on and try to just suppress him so that they can never really try to utilize the sustain as the game turns into more of those team fight transitions, because Fenrir Brutalized, level 7, that's a whole heck of a lot of damage, and if he rushes a beat stick early on, that's a potential 900 damage right off the bat, and it's just tough for a Raw to look for those basically extended team fights, because if he can't even keep himself alive, no shot he's going to be able to do the same for his team.
Well, you can start to see a thread form as well as the Camelot Kings have locked in their jungler, Naja for Captain Twig. And in the games where we've seen this Raw, it's usually paired with something for Twig like this Naja. You want to give the Searing Pains as easy setup as you can for Big Man Tings to hit. I think Big Man Tings good enough at Raw that he likely hits them anyway, but then you have King Arthur on the other side as well, so some early lockdown for the King is going to bode well for the mid laner.
And most people would probably expect, okay, Neja, that's clearly going to be Raw ult Searing Pain every single time off the Windfire wheels, but that's not necessarily the case. Even just the Sash alone could be more than enough setup for Big Man to try and look for that big team fight damage ultimate. And more importantly, though, I'm really just loving the fact that Tings and Twig, they're not trying to switch it up. They know what kind of wombo combos work out best for them, and they are willing, I think, to challenge the Oni Warriors. It's a little bit of a heat check, I think, running the Neja, because Neja, at times, even though I know it's been a prevalent pick for Twig, at least in the pro regards, I would say he's a little bit more lackluster simply because of the fact that oftentimes you would just expect competitive players to be able to beads out that Sash ultimate pretty easy, or just straight up beads in the ultimate. But for Dardes, that could be a little bit more troublesome due to that ping disparity.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's a good pick for Twig as well to kind of continue some of that momentum. The shift to the jungle has looked pretty good for Captain Twig so far here in Season 8. The second wave of bans have rolled through. Look at the pressure the Oni Warriors are putting on Genetics on the other side. I mentioned that the one pick in the last 6 games that Genetics played that was not Ymir or Yamoja was Fafnir, and now that one gets banned out. So Genetics has been playing well enough that the Oni Warriors are just going to try to mitigate that support god pool as much as they can.
There is a small chance, though, that I think we could see a possible Artio or even an Ares pick. Just a nice cripple could be very complimenting to this King's draft, because the cool part about having a Neja already is, sure, you can maybe beads the ult, but not necessarily be able to cleanse follow-up CC from other frontline members. And I just think that an Artio or an Ares could definitely be pretty justifiable here. And the big thing I'm also taking a look at is this Fenrir pick could potentially struggle. There's a lot of interrupt already available between the King Arthur and Asia.
And Heimdall looks like a good pick here then, maybe suddenly, Taco, for Netroid. In the last 6 games, the one time we saw Heimdall was way back against the Bolts, and that was a win for the Kings. 3-1-9 Netroid win the last time he played Heimdall. And so Heimdall's kind of been in this weird spot where, you know, Chiron has been at the forefront of the Hunter conversation. Anher's still been in there as well, but Heimdall may be still in a spot where it can perform well.
It'll definitely be an interesting matchup against the Chiron because Chiron does have very good range to try and follow up, and plus with him now being knock-up immune, I could definitely see some struggles there for Heimdallr not being able to really use that 2 charge any longer to push that Chiron off from laning pressure.
What do we see here then out of the mid lane for Dardes? Discordia, Gilgamesh paired together, but I want to focus on that Discordia a little bit. This has been kind of that pocket pick answered for just a few players over the last couple of weeks. 4 games played so far for the Discordia. Does it fit into this draft in your mind for the Oni Warriors?
It's a little bit awkward. I was kind of hoping for some bigger early game aggression to complement that Fenrir Kakolin because I'm breaking this down for the 3v3 largely, and Disco, while I think can be very useful because you know that the Kings are going to probably centralize everything around their initiation and setup for whatever comes down from Twig's ultimate and that Windfire wheel. So Disco can be great for just helping spread everybody out so that the follow-up isn't as immediate. But at the same time, it's Disco into King Arthur, Neja, and what's going to be the Ares here for Genetics.
Yeah, and you figured we might see an Ares here. And we do see an Ares now for Genetics. So it feels like the avenues for setup, of course, the most immediate and maybe obvious is this Naja, the Sash, the Windfire wheels. But it seems like effectively everyone, even down to the Heimdall, have some way of finding a target against the Oni Warriors.
For sure, and not only that, because Chiron, while he does have the cleanse available with that training exercise, you can't cleanse all of the CC that the Kings are actually bringing to the table. I feel like Oni could potentially get bombarded, but if they're able to survive that immediate pressure, because Kings are for sure a little bit more favorable, I think, in their early game fights, all Oni have to do is stalemate until they can make it to the big team fighting action. If they get this Disco online to mid to late game, she does some serious damage.
That's a good point. The win condition then for the Oni Warriors is surviving this onslaught of CC. Where do you see the Fenrir, though, slotting in there, Taco? Kind of a hybrid between you want to get aggressive early, but maybe you need to survive into late.
A little bit of both, honestly. He's just going to have to pick his poison at times.
Yeah, the Oni Warriors, look, a chance to punch their tickets onto the Phase 1 playoffs against a very formidable opponent in the Camelot Kings. The Oni Warriors have a chance to go 2-0 in this group. Only the Jade Dragons have matched that record so far. Oni Warriors versus Camelot Kings. Game 1 starts right now.
Thanks so much, Dave and Taco on the desk. Joining me for this one is going to be the wonderful Gormizer. Go, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. We had a much, I want to say maybe quicker than expected first set here.
Not from my angle, but sure.
Yeah,
sure,
well, it depends on how much hope you're putting into the Valkyries. But here, this is one, the pace of it's honestly determined more by the Warriors than it is the Kings. We know how they've been performing. This is one that could go just as fast as set number 1. It could go a little longer. It depends on how they've been playing. We've seen the Titans kind of step up to the plate and start knocking them out of the park. The Warriors are right there. They're starting to get pretty close. They beat the Scarabs, but this is going to be a much better testament, I should say, to their skill.
And talking about drafts real quick, I mean, obviously the desk was breaking it down there, but very physical heavy for both teams here. No Guardians involved. Well, I tell a lie, there is an Ares, but really, is he a Guardian or just another damage dealer? And more importantly, seeing Neil back on the Fenrir again, specifically, I guess, around the whole draft situation there. Yeah. See what we can actually make happen with this Fenrir combination. Naja in the jungle, though, for Captain Twig. It was mentioned on the desk. One of his go-tos back in the day in the jungle. And that will synergize really well with Big Man Tings on Raw. An old, if you say, EU throwback, so to speak, of the Naja ult into Raw Snipe. Can they make it happen?
I mean, at this point, I don't even know if it's much of a throwback for him. Like, it has been the go-to combo for BMT and Twig so far this year. Like, if they can get it, they lock it in. If you can get the Naja, it's go-to for the Naja. Then it probably falls to, like, the Fenrir, other setup junglers there for Twig. And Ra has been just such a big pick for BMT, and if they get that combo off, which they will get that combo off, it's just going to be a lot of devastating damage. You can already see Cubo doesn't necessarily have the health bar to deal with that, but maybe later on that warrior scaling will help at least a little bit.
Nice little workout, Genetics there, just keeping him pinned on the tower line, giving a bit of room for Netroid to get that Harpy. It's not a huge amount of experience, but it's a little bit better when you get it on your own and get uncontested there, so that will help out a little bit in the lane for the Camelot Kings early on as we check in with the dual lane 2 well, I guess OGs at this point. I mean, Variety certainly OG from Season 1 all the way through, but Nika rising to fame as the years go on now as one of the most dangerous solo laners alongside, well, let's be honest, there's a few names in the solo lane this day and age that stand out.
Nika has been maybe the most prevalent lately, and not necessarily because the others haven't been performing to the same standard, but because Nika has been looking just as good despite his team not being there to help him out and do so. And so I think that's something that's been the kind of talk of the town. He was playing Tsukiyomi solo, doing things like that, and looking phenomenal on that to the point where if the Warriors were looking like they could win games in their sets, it was probably because of Nika, and I'm worried if he doesn't get off to the same start, or if this Kukulkan can't find the same kind of grip we're used to seeing for him, that might honestly be the beginning of the end for the Warriors already.
He might actually be able to get a kill here on Variety with the pressure he's found so far on this right-hand side. Exactly what you're hoping out of Kukulkan in this early stage matchup. Sure, King Arthur is a bit of a pain in the backside to try and deal with as the game goes on, but in the early stages, Kukulkan with the transformations, he can get control of that lane, and he's doing so far.
I like the fact that he's already been able to find that. It does force Twig to make that awkward decision. Ra's not level 5 yet, so right now it's kind of easy. Hey, you're going to do just fine, BMT. I'm going to leave you alone. I'm going to go help out Variety for a little while, see if we can keep him on track to make sure he doesn't lose too much farm, because neither of the solo laners have on teleport. Yesterday, that was kind of a pickup that we'd see occasionally. Usually, it helps alleviate some of the stress of losing out on, almost your life there, like Variety forced back to base, but without that, he is going to have to be worried about it. In fact, even now, Variety, despite being pushed back, has a small lead over Nika, as his ult available, and just now ticked over to level 5 there for Nika. So if he can keep that up, that's even better for him, and it should then allow Twig, once he hits 5, to start paying more attention to BMT and try to just abuse this mid lane combo.
See a quick early back there from the Only Warriors duo lane as Neil will pick up his full boots. However, Vote returned to base too, interestingly enough. Picked himself up a ward and only the tier 2 boots so far. So they're expecting to kind of tread water in this duo lane for the time being, it feels like to me. At least Vote is, with how this early pressure went there. But what can we see Neil do as he now starts to rotate around the map? Because that's where the issue for the Warriors has been this year, is the trio. Cuvo, Dardes struggling a little bit with the extra ping that they're having to play with. And that has really hurt them a lot. And same can be said, I guess, for Neil. All three of the trio having a couple of issues with that. And I think that's where the Warriors have really struggled so far this year.
And the far away land of Canada for Neil having, but it's one of those things, like, it doesn't seem too crazy far, and then you account for distance and you realize his ping is just the same as the Europeans. It gets really weird.
I guess that's just an American thing that you all think it's just far away lands,
Well, to be fair, so if you compare it, the states in the U.S. are around the size of the countries in Europe.
Yep.
And so if you think it's like 5 or 6 states away, that doesn't sound like that much. 5 or 6 countries away, all of a sudden it's like, man, Canada's pretty far.
Oh, sash out early on from Twig, gets the beads from Cubo, drop kicks him back. Bad news bears, though, he used the beads and into the pull and snipe. Beautiful combination from the Camelot Kings.
And I didn't even think about that combo. Their third portion of it, if you beads the sash, Ares is just going to pull you back in with a no escape if they're hanging out in the 3v3, which they should be at this point. And it's starting to cause a little bit more distress. Neil, now Chain, won't be able to jump away. I don't know if there's follow-up here for Genetics, but I like the fact that he's showing face and making sure that people know that they need to be worried about it. I expect to see that kind of combo a lot more consistently. And look, you get all of the relics on the side of the Kings still up coming out of that fight. That's exactly the kind of get in, get out they want to do.
What a great situation for the Kings, though. I mean, Twig steps up for a second, throws out one sash, and they get a kill because of it. And all he had to do was throw a sash.
He just had to be there.
Yeah, he got sash into, kicked away, and they get a kill off it. That's pretty good. And more credit where it's due to Genetics there for the timing of knowing that was a situation. Speaking of that, Ragnarok used, but Genetics with a very quick 180 blink away from that engagement before he was in combat allows him to escape the danger. Ult for blink expended.
And that's going to be a little more problematic for Neil at this point. I mean, you had kind of mentioned it. They were treading water. That was the phrase you used for the duo lane. And now Neil's trying to be proactive, but look, when I see Fenrir, I want him to be aggressive, especially as a support. Like, you have to use the fact that you're an assassin, that you have that damage early on, and it opens up some opportunities for you that you just wouldn't otherwise have, but he's not getting a lot done compared to what I'd really like to see.
In fairness, the blink going down from Genetics ain't too bad. I mean, for my liking there, that's more an individual play from Genetics on this areas of like, hey, I am really immobile, and if this dog's going to run at me with CC immunity, there's not a whole lot I can do here, except realize where I could blink the 180 away just in time. We'll see if that continues on, though, as the dual lane is starting to get looked at by Kings here. While in the solo, Nika's still having a good old time up against Variety so far. And no signs of rotations in sight just yet out of Kivo Fred, who's trying to defend this left-hand red buff that it looks like Kings are looking for.
I'm kind of surprised to see him get this aggressive, but again, the chains open up so many opportunities.
And the chain's doing good damage to Neil there with the support of Twig in tow. Dada's trying to support, but now Dada's could be under burden pressure from Tings. Well, use the escape for a second and hide in it, but now that's not going to be available for this red buff. 4-on-4 could happen, but red has already gone down. And then instantly reposition from Netroid there. Jane's going to get a no escape off, though. And Neil Marr gets credit for the kill. Good work from any Warriors to return a kill back for losing the red buff.
Still a good response from Genetics. I like the fact that they get the kill, but even still being able to consume Neil's ult in that manner, just instant recognition, similar to what he did with the blink earlier, where it's just recognizing the only way to get out is to use his no escape, but unfortunately there was no escape for him at the same time. Yeah, he's not going to get out of that one alive. And that is what I want to see more out of Neil, is just being able to put people in these lose-lose scenarios.
And you called it. He goes head straight after that and gets that purple buff away from Netroid, who's trying to defend that too. So small little wins out of Neil there. Yeah, he gets that first kill for the team. He wouldn't have necessarily liked it, but it will help him out in the long run. Interesting, though, build choices. Talked a lot about, these Thebes rushes that we've been seeing a lot lately after boots. This game, Genetics, though, switching things up. And maybe this is because of the 4 physical stack we see on the Any Warriors here. Looks like a Sov rush this.
Yeah, it'd be such an easy choice, right? To be able to run into it, all of a sudden, like your mid 3v3, that allows Twig, Tings to be, I don't want to say less careful, they still have to be a little more worried, but they're going to be able to take a couple of punches now from Neil, from Cuvo, without really worrying about it. Once Vote joins the equation, it's still going to be just as effective. It does have to wait until he actually has it for that aura to be online, but it benefits because then it also pays off for Ares' passive. He's going to be able to have a little more damage, so more bang for his buck. It's just a 1-2 punch that's going to work out well for him, and that's kind of scary. Things have already been going well for Genetics. I don't know if necessarily you want him to have any more synergy with that build.
Well, the 2 hunters this game, different starter items, but the Transcendence and Ninja Tabby for both of them. And I think that kind of comes out because of this Transcendence build here as well, Gore, because, you're not getting as much attack speed as you once were. Hold that thought, though. Gank on the right-hand side. Nika trying to limp back to his tower. And actually, Twig will change his mind. But yeah, dual lane, both with Transcendence. This is the new rise of this now.
Yeah, I think it's been, 2 weeks we've started to see it really kind of come into fruition. I think it's the manner, not just of the build, some of the items that were nerfed that kind of helped alleviate the stress. Like, you don't necessarily go
buff,
for what your Devos immediately into Executioner and Wind Demon.
Yep.
You go for your Transcendences now. Maybe a little later you get an Aussie, like you said, make up for the attack speed somewhere else, make up for the lifesteal somewhere else, and then fit it into your build. We're still seeing like a coin flip depending on how the other team is doing. If it's going to be a crit build, your Wind Demons, your Deathbringers, or if they're going to be going into Chin Size, your Titan's Bane, go for something more penetration build and health build. And that is something that I think we're going to see probably crit. Looking at it, there's a lot of assassins. There are a lot of squishy targets out there. Outside of Genetics and Variety, maybe that can warrant where Vote goes, but not too much.
Netroid trying to defend his buff and takes away Neil for a second to secure it. Neil will jump away. Good damage out from Netroid at the tail end there. Not bad work from the Hunter on his own on this left-hand side. Basically, though, I like what the use of it was, but now that ultimate on cooldown, it could present a bit of an opportunity for a bit more aggression in this dual lane now.
I think it opens, like you said, a lot of opportunities. Bede's still up there for Heimdall. Bifrost still good. Definitely something. And what I like right there, we get to see it. It's such a small thing, but keeping those crystals closer together makes them on a much smaller cooldown, takes way less time to travel as well. And so just keeping those updated in somewhere that is safe enough, and the purple buff is going to be able to allow Netroid ideally to get out of trouble.
And there you go. We were just talking about exactly the situation of getting aggressive now that ultimate's down. Beads are now consumed, so Netroids are sitting duck for a little while longer.
Yeah.
Before he's going to get any more help. The question is, what really do they have to gank with now? They've used the Ragnarok, right? So I guess you're looking at Cuvo, maybe paying a visit over here. But speaking of paying a visit, just look at that clump in there, Gore, of Camelot Kings just slowly navigating towards this left-hand side to make sure the pressure's relieved.
As we can see highlighted there, covered over by a couple of wards, so maybe not necessarily as in much trouble as it looked like. Neil and Vote able to back off pretty soon after they saw that, but that's a kind of frightening point. Like you said, what are you going to gank with now? I mean, Cuvo can come over and try to get a drop kick, but that doesn't seem really reliable in the grand scheme of things onto someone like Netroid who can drop the Bifrost once you ping a ward. So And maybe it's going to take a little while, and a little while isn't going to be enough. He's already got his ult back up, so there's one form appeal. Still 100 seconds on the beads, but that's safety.
Yeah, thinking about the gank of Gilgamesh against, Heimdall as well, I guess the game plan is hold your dropkick until he tries to go through the Bifrost.
And then knock him
away from it so he doesn't go through. Could be an option. We'll see as the game goes on, but Netroid has his ultimate back up and available again, so it's going to be a bit of a different story this time round. However, just checking in with builds there, Dawn is in the mid lane, going for this Divine Ruin early. Don't see too much of it, but in this situation, I do like the pick-up early on here, Gore. Yeah. There is quite a bit of heal on the side of the Kings.
Yeah, when Ra is there, when you have the passive from Naja as well, like there's immediate healing that he's dealing with in lane. Eventually, you're going to have some of the lifesteal items built up, plus now that Stone of Gaia, what King Arthur's going to try to be working with. It's just going to pay dividends. That's the best way to look at it. It's going to be very useful because Discordia is pretty easily able to apply that to damn near everybody in the middle of a team fight if she gets her way.
Neilmar jumps on Genetics for a second. Big Man Ting stacks up as one chain connects from Genetics there. Pressure relief for now, but the dance around these oracles continues for a second until Cuvo Fred shows his face and goes the way of the Warriors for now. Gold differential between the two, though. Not much really separating them at the moment. It is about a 1,000 gold lead for the Kings. Some of that will be the first blood and just the early game rotations.
I forgot for a little bit how much damage Ra can do just without his ult, let alone win his ult.
Well, with that build he's going too. Spirit Deso online already? Yeah.
A lot of power. Kivo, I don't know if this is a fight you want to take.
Oh, Genetics is not a fight he wants to take. He's taking tower damage too. He's standing tall as long as possible, but he'll still end up falling down thanks to Nika rotating in with mainly Kivo's help, but the sash in mid from Twig. Instantly Nika will beads that and ult away. Variety jump to the back line there, trying to get a bit of a cheeky poke out, does so, but it doesn't come for anything. However, that tower in the mid lane is really on its last legs right now.
It felt like a much more massive advantage for the Kings going into that, so I'm surprised not only to see someone go down, but for them to not get anything that they wanted out of it. Like you said, the tower is almost dead, but technically not dead, which is something that they can really at least keep themselves happy about. That's a little less gold for the Kings to work with going in right now.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like most of that tower goes down, that's 500 gold for losing your Ares. Is that really that bad? I think the Ares player would say, yes, that's terrible. But I think everybody else would be like, I'll take 500 gold as a team.
Buy a couple of wards. Well, Genetics buys a couple of wards with it. The Charon's coin finish for BMT. He did it whether or not he had that extra gold in his pockets. I think that's interesting to see. Again, the combo that I've expected from the Kings hasn't really happened since that first minute.
Blink in, Sash 2, Votes now got no beads, uses ult very early on, trying to return fire. He realizes there was no escape there, and that wasn't even utilized because it was on cooldown, but straight away Kings rotate in, and straight away they're off to the Fury.
I like this call. I mean, Neil, what's he going to do? If he jumps in, he's an assassin still, he's going to die. You have a raw beam over Discordia Apple? Yeah, you're going to be able to take that objective 9 times out of 10.
But the ultimate is available. Oh, they said it, and Gold Fury still going to go to Kings though. Was that a bait is the question. I don't think it was, but let's give the Kings the benefit of the doubt. They were trying to get Neil into dangerous territory, and they did so. He's still alive for now. The Sash will close a bit of the distance, as will the ult, but Neilmar will escape danger. Let's say the Kings did that on purpose, right? to make Big Man Ting's stat line look worse on hitting snipes.
Yeah.
And secondly, to maybe get a kill on Neil and still get the goal.
I like the idea if it is a bait, right?
It's
and
not,
of course, now that
yeah.
we've thrown that out there, that's all they're going to say. Afterward, they'll listen to it and they'll be like, yeah, we totally meant to do that to bait Neil in. Unfortunately, they didn't get the kill, so even if it was, it didn't quite work out the way they wanted to. Ooh. Either way, they get the Gold Fury, so I don't think they're sweating too badly about it. Definitely a lot closer than they would have liked or needed.
But surprised by the amount of pressure the Kings found on that dual lane after the Gold Fury, because they go back to dual lane, take out that tier 1 tower too, as Vote and Neil were not around to be able to defend it at all. So this opens up this left-hand side of the map even more, especially when we talk about that tier 1 tower. Very, very close to death already in mid. There's a lot of control already available for Kings to get some of these deeper wards in and maybe start looking at these red and purple invades more often.
That's going to be the troublesome and problematic nature that Vote and Neil more than anybody are going to have to deal with. I think Neil twofold, since he's going to have to be present both duo and mid. But it's going to make it a lot more interesting. Discordia is going to have to play a little safer. We've seen Dardes occasionally just throwing out his dash for the sake of throwing it out. They're not doing a whole ton of damage at this point either. So there is something to be said. Right now, it's all on Nika, where he's getting that passive from Discordia as well, and that's not necessarily getting a lot of utilization in these team fights just yet. 16 minutes in, though, I think we're about to start seeing the solo laners make their rotations.
Well, we're going to see the Pyromancer getting pulled and drop to low health. Neilmar steps up, Janex hits him with a chain. Darda's looking at this camp on the left-hand side. Needs to be careful with positioning, though, as Twig's Blink is available again once more. And like you said, the solo leaders might start to get involved now. Nika at level 17 in this game is the standout far for the Warriors. He's done a great job of continuing to farm up, but look at the difference in mid. That's where the level discrepancies are. Solo lane has an advantage for the Warriors, but the Kings in mid have a 2-level lead.
And it's a little more frightening there. I think that, yes, your Warriors, like a level 17 Cucullin versus a level 16 King Arthur, I'm not too stressed out about the one level. Level 17 Ra versus level 15 Discordia, that's scary. That's a lot more damage that he's going to have online. He's going to either, or more healing depending on where he's leveling things up. It's going to give him his ult a little bit further. It's a lot more secure for these objectives, but really it's that Wombo combo that once again can come into the equation. If you have BMT within range of Twig at any given time, there's almost a, I'd say, what, like 60% likelihood, some random number like that, for them to get a kill as long as the Sash connects.
I really do like the Karen's coin on Raw specific as well, because it just kind of plays into the passive a little bit more. More mobility, right?
Yeah.
That adds up to me, plus the extra penetration that's going to come from that. However, Lotus Crown also picked up by Big Man Tings this game, and that will give him a bit more sustain, or more armor, I should say, in these team fights, because that's actually better than a Thebes once you've had a healer provided. However, Pyromancer now start up again. Neil wrapping around the back, looking for an opportunity to pull them away from it, and does so. Pyromancer reset, allowing Dardes and Cuvo a chance to step in. But as soon as Dardes does, Genetics is there. Dropkick forced by Cuvo Fred, and slowly but surely, Genetics being whittled down here. Neil's waiting for him to land, and brings him back to the team. But where's the follow-up, guys? They need to kill Genetics here to make that worthwhile, and that won't be the case at all. Neilmar is forced back away as Variety steps up, so they get Variety to the Genetics. I guess that's not too bad, actually.
Honestly, the way the fights have been going the last few times have been just cleaner for the Warriors. They've had these engagements where it feels like the Kings are the ones wanting to fight, the Kings are the ones who should be walking away more successful. But it's been twice now. Genetics is the one who gets picked on. Their Variety is the one who gets picked on. And if they can continue eliminating them, one more frontliner is all it's going to take here for Nika. That's just a good kill to get in and make sure that you continue this lead. The frontliners for the Kings are the ones that are in more trouble than anybody else.
I kind of like the idea of fighting this until he realizes Big Man Tings is waiting on landing, but he can't find the 1-2 ultimate, and that could be punished back because Cuvo Fred's on the scene, and Dardes whipping his way over here real quick to try and keep the pressure going. Couple more basics needed. Big Man Tings will slip away as Genetics did fall on a, in my opinion, Genetics shouldn't have been there. He got greedy for farm, but that's why they all started. However, Warriors find another window now. Go at the Pyro.
This has been better than we've gotten to see out of them for a large margin of the year. And with that Pyromancer, it goes from what was about 1,000 to 300, something that you don't even have to worry about in terms of gold. Experience is more so in their favor. Granted, a lot of that earlier, and a lot of it still is in that solo lane, 19 to 17. But a little bit in the jungle, there's a little bit there for supports. So they do have enough of a lead that at this point they can start feeling comfortable saying that they are winning the game. Maybe not through quite all of the towers, not quite through the objectives, but at least in terms of kills, they've been able to control it. Now they can force their hand, make the Kings make awkward decisions around Gold Furies and Fire Giants.
Neomar's going to get hit by all three chains, but not a ton of damage coming through there. Now that Pridwin's online too, gives him a couple of extra protections. But look at Twig. He's found an angle on Vote. Gets the sash off too. Early beads from Vote. Cleanse after the fact to try and juke away and giddy up. Turns around for the snipes, but don't find it. But all the while, Neil on the back line trying to survive. Juke boots are online for Neil though. Just sidesteps that snipe out of Ra. And that still opens a window, though, with some of those relics used for the Kings to maybe look at this Fury if they feel confident. However, they don't have that Ra ultimate.
Yeah, blinks are down, beads are down, but there's still a Sunder as well as an Ankh for Neil, and he's fine enough to be able to come back into this, although he's pretty far away. It's going to be Nika if anyone's going to be able to run this show.
Nice work from Nika, all in Twig, and Twig will go down. Most of the work done from Nika, but the follow-up damage from Dardes was big. Nika getting very low, though, and needs some help soon. Variety was spinning to win as fast as he can, but he's forced out by Cuvo Fred, and a dog's got a bone, bringing him back. It's Big Man Tings. This is great from the Warriors, 7-2. And the Fury could be theirs.
And this is such a big moment for them. I mean, we'we've been talking about it, but looking at the Warriors, the Kings need this win in order to continue themselves, keep themselves in the conversation. Otherwise, they go down 0-2 in the standings. The Warriors would be 2-0. They win this set. They go to playoffs. That's something that's going to be a lot of weight.
Well, Genetics under pressure,
Okay.
but nice damage out from
Come on,
Netroid,
guys.
and not respecting how much he's doing there. Now Cubo under pressure too, has beads available, luckily enough, to escape the no escape. But as we were saying, Warriors stepping up here with this composition. What is it been the game changer for me? I guess it's kind of these Nika rotations, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it is much more in par with what they've been doing in the past, right? It's always been when Nika joins the fight, the Warriors feel like they just level up to a different entity, a different kind of team. But I also have to give credit, like Dardas is doing a lot of damage. He's got 4 stacks versus 0. I think he even was the second person to get the Charon's coin here, so it took him a little longer to get it online, and yet he's still going to get a little more out of it than what BMT has, and the damage numbers have been great for him.
That's true. I mean, the one thing about Discordia as well, it kind of goes unnoticed sometimes, but it is that passive she brings to the team. And guess who's got that passive the whole way?
All Nika.
It's this Nika in the solo lane. So Yuka Cullen swinging even harder in these engagements. But he's got to be careful about fights like this. He is setting up for his team. No transformation should be coming through soon. And he's going to look towards Genetics, trapping him in the Fire Giant pit for now. Whittles down the health bar for a second. But all the while, it was just pinning the Kings back for the time being. They will get the Greater Scorpion, though, as both teams kind of settle for a second. I'm kind of looking in the itemization to see where things are. Bulwark of Hope out from Genetics. I love that pickup under the circumstances. But more importantly, Twig's build here is very utility-focused. Brawler's Beatstick, Witchblade, and Pridwin, of all things, combine pretty well.
I mean, it's going to be good for him. I just feel like we haven't gotten to see him utilize enough of it so far. I feel like every now and then, like, we're getting some ults out of him, some sashes out of him, but that combo that we've been looking for hasn't really existed the way that we anticipated it early on.
I think the one time we could have seen it maybe was when we saw the ult over near the speed buff of the Camelot Kings.
Yeah.
But I think Big Man Ting's got a bit fancy. He went for the 1-4 knockout punch, and in doing so, he just mistimed his opportunity there.
Just slightly.
And that just caused a bit of a problem for him where he did escape for now. So kind of evenly balanced for the most part. Warriors are in the lead, although when you look at the tower situation, it wouldn't necessarily tell you that with how the state of the game has been. And rightly so, Kings got off to a great start, but Warriors, now that they've managed to get their solo laner into the fray in a straight-up 5v5, are starting to find more bang for their buck in this one.
This is where things, specifically the Fire Giant, becomes such a crucial moment, because if Warriors get it, it takes their gold lead and it ramps it up to 1,000. They are going to be able to feel very confident in their capabilities. But if the Kings get it, it goes right back to potentially maybe even back in their favor after they knock down some of those towers. With both teams have tier 2s exposed, but the mid and left being exposed for the Warriors hurts a little bit more in terms of when that Fire Giant, if it gets applied there for the Kings. So something that they're going to have to be worried about, although right now it doesn't seem, even 24 minutes in, like either of these teams are that worried about that one. Pyromancer may be in the equation over there. It's looking like a tier 1 push, or at least some pressure here from the Warriors to try and get the ball rolling for him. And again, as they can open it up, at least get the tier 2s, that's an easy access to a Phoenix, easy access to the Titan if they're able to win a big fight.
Biggest notice, no beads on the side of Genetics here. He went for the Thorns to go alongside the Blink this game. So he's still a prime target, maybe for the Ragnarok pull-ins. Got to be careful, though, because, you know, if you arrive at the destination as an Ares, what you're going to do, you're probably going to press Ultimate and maybe pull the enemy team into a dangerous situation unless you can kill him in time. Looking through the rest of the relic choices there as well, you do see that Cursed Ankh from Neilmar. That could be a big game changer. That upgraded relic makes you take more damage.
Yeah, that is the part that really hurts. I mean, and we've already seen what Discordia is doing, what Nika's doing with that damage. They're in the top 3, so you're going to apply that and then extend it a little bit further if Neil's in the fight. I think that's just going to benefit them, and maybe doesn't necessarily counteract, quote-unquote, the Thorns, but it makes it a little easier to ignore the fact that you're taking damage.
Neilmar gets aggressive after Captain Twig jumped on him there for a second or two. Like the idea of Neil, instead of just falling back, looks for a bit more poke. Hunter builds, a little bit of a differential there between the two. Vote got rid of his Bluestone early on, has already invested into a Wind Demon for a bit of crit in this build, whereas Netroid, different opportunity, headed for those chin size. So that'll allow him to shred down some of these tankier targets on the side of the Warriors.
And that's just response to the builds, right? Like, you've got 2 Warriors to deal with to begin with, so you're kind of thinking, maybe I need something. Then you look at Neil and his build, and you're like, all right, I want to burn through some health bars here. I need to do whatever I can. Heimdall hits really hard in these scenarios, too, so with the setup, as long as Netroid's in the fight, it should continue to go their way. His damage, at least, should be pretty solid for them. But the problem has been the setup for the damage dealers, right? Tings and Netroid haven't really gotten to show off as much of what they can do because, unfortunately, Twig, when beads are available, Genetics, if he goes in, half the time he's been dying because of it. He goes in, then immediately Fenrir ulted. So I think Variety is going to need to be a big playmaker, and we're going to have to see Genetics and specifically Twig figure out a little more nuance to how they want to approach it. There's 4 pairs of beads to burn on the other side, so a lot to stress about if you're trying to CC the Warriors, and I think this is a good fight to try and test the waters.
Well, it's been quiet for a few minutes, but now with this Primal Fury spawning here, Gore, we may see a bit more action again. Both teams kind of wrestled backwards and forwards through the first 20, getting control of the game, but now it's kind of petered out for the time being as both teams don't feel too confident. I feel Kings were kept getting aggressive, and then the Warriors were counterpunching effectively. And all of a sudden, Kings like, well, let's not get aggressive ourselves this time. Let's let them initiate. Although, with the Fury, they are going to pull it and see if they can get a response, and Neil's looking for that response now. All in on Nika. Sorry, on Big Man Tings. The combo was really good after Nika follows up there, and Tings trapped in the ultimate. Neil gets credit for the kill. Forced away his Twig with his ultimate defensiveness to survive. Netroid, different story. Can't get through the Bifrost, and Cuvo Fred gets a double kill. The Warriors are playing today, and Variety's trying to pick up Darnez at the tail end, but Darnez bought enough time to survive. A rampage for Nika, and a Fire Giant core is what I can see on the cards.
I mean, that's exactly what they want. You have a couple of relics burned there from the Warriors, but I mean, you had highlighted that on going into that fight. It's the first thing that Neil does when he gets into the backline. He makes sure that healing is gone, and Big Man Teens' health bar just melts because of it.
I will say that one of the best things about that whole play is Raw couldn't get his beads off, and that's no discredit to Big Man Tings there. Nika's Blink Initiation is a knock-up. You can't beads when you're in the air, don't do nothing for you. So that gives Neil a chance to do some setup, get some extra damage off, and they burst him down before he could be effective. Great play from the Warriors, and now all 5 have the Fire Giant. Where do you go now? Is it gold first and then some towers on left, or what do you think?
Since it's a Primal Fury, like, you're going to burn it down really quickly. It looks like that might be what they have in mind, considering they're separating up. I was going to say you could probably leave this one, since there's no neutral objectives immediately available for you afterward. Knock down that tier 1 in mid on your path over to left. This is going to give them a chance to regroup. Their buffs are respawning. Maybe this is looking for setup. I have no clue what Twig hopes to accomplish here. This is not the kind of fight I would want to take, and it looks like he's going to at least back off in this scenario. Goes for the steal, though, so I have to give him a little bit of props for that.
You gotta go for the steals.
But at this moment, it's getting a lot more, I want to say, just awkward for the Kings. You can't engage because we've seen how that's gone. That was the first 20 minutes. You can't not engage because we've seen how that's gone. It's been the last 8 minutes.
I think that's the one thing with King Arthur. We know King Arthur is very prevalent and everyone loves him right now. We saw Haddix earlier today have a wonderful performance. But initiation on the side of Kings is very telegraphed again, and we've been talking a lot about that, I feel, this year, of telegraphed engages from teams. And from a King's point of view, it really is a couple of blinks that you're going to rely on, or a sashing from Najjar from a distance. So as long as you can keep away or keep wary of those situations, it's only Warriors' decisions when they want to get aggressive, and mainly it'll be Nika. They've got a triple threat in my eyes of diving on in. Nika's giving something Cuvo is, but so's Neil as well. And that's allowing them some opportunity. I won't say it's better than the Kings' engagement. It's very similar, if anything.
But it's, like you said, slightly less, not even, I don't even know if it's less telegraphed as much as it's just more difficult to deal with. At least, like you said, with Nika, it's a knock-up immediately. Once that comes through, it doesn't matter if it's Neil, Darnez, Cuvo, Vote, whoever happens to be there, they're going to have an easy time applying damage or CC afterward. And it's going to make things a little bit more awkward. Beads still up for BMT. Soon enough, he's going to have that Aegis Beads just now available for Netroid, so theoretically, there's some defense coming online for them to keep him alive a little bit longer. And once those are up, the fight's going to be pretty much even. It's 15 seconds left for Darnez. They're going into this on equal footing, save for the Fire Giant.
Yeah, I guess it's mainly the Fenrir because of the fact he can just leap in, leap out, use his ultimate, you know. He's got a few available options to allow it, and that Fenrir being tanky definitely helps to
look at his loop already.
He couldn't go for it, but Nika's going to go back to it again. Gets on a Big Man Tings. Big Man Tings drops to half health, forced away by Nika, who's still chasing on down, and should be able to find the kill. The Aegis though bought him some time, and the whole team of the Kings collapse to try and keep Nika at bay. They do get his beads, but the tier 2 falls, and as Big Man and Netroid both limp to the fountain, guess what happens, Gordon? The Warriors charge for the Phoenix.
That was one of those moments. They get the Phoenix, they get the bird. Looks like they should be able to get out. I mean, they're still 5 strong, and they're missing a jungler there for the Kings. Maybe not enough time left. Well, a minute and 10 seconds. That's actually plenty of time to try and get aggressive on this mid lane Phoenix. And they've got a little bit of sustain for themselves. Not a whole ton to keep themselves alive, but the Warriors should be relatively high enough now to be able to get aggressive, come back in, waiting for maybe the minion wave and for Nika to catch up. But that was one of those weird moments, too, where Nika, had that tier 2 tower not been there, might have wanted to get pulled by the Ares ult to go in there. So maybe they're going to be able to play around that. Looks like right now they're just playing for gold. They're already up about 6,000 just in this FG. And that's going to be something that they're going to have to worry about. It's a 12,000, 13,000 gold lead.
And now go spend some of that gold in hand. You can see 3,000 nearly for Cuvo Fred, who, let's be honest,
lot.
Cuvo's quietly but confidently started to play his way into this game a little bit more for me than I've seen in a few weeks too. He's looking pretty good here today, and that's no discredit to the rest of his team, but it's good to see Cuvo looking a little bit better than he has as of late. It's unusual to see him have such a poor performance through the regular season. He's been someone that's always stood out as he now goes for that Magi's Cloak too, an extra bit of CC immunity for him. As some of these boots start to get sold off now, as those speed elixirs come through to help out there, we'll see exactly what happens then as this next fight entails, because this is an enhanced fire giant this time round too, Go.
That's the big power spike. Not only an enhanced fire giant, but because those boots are getting sold off, for some of them, not quite every member there for the Oni Warriors able to get rid of it. It looks like 3 out of 5 of them were able to. That's a giant leap above. Like, boots are a really worthwhile item, but if you can sell them off for another tier 3, you're going to get a little bit more out of that. That's why it's so worthwhile in this late game period, and right now that's what we're looking at. At least, you know, you look at Dardez, you look at Cuvo, they both get a little more survivability in their builds. I could also just say the same there for Nika as well, but that's kind of all his build is survivability. It's just going to make it a lot more difficult for the Kings to then get those retaliation kills. And like you said, Cuvo, I mean, affecting 11 of the 12 kills, it's something that we haven't really gotten to say a lot this year. It feels like this Gilgamesh style is just fitting perfectly in with what they're trying to do. And it's not often that the assists for your mid and your carry are this much higher than their kills. I mean, 9 assists there for Vote, 7 for Dardez. They're just helping out.
Neil going in, gets taken to another realm for a second as Cuvo is threading around the back looking for Tings. Nika took a brutal of the damage from the front line and still survives for now. Cuvo leaps on in though to keep the pressure rolling with Nika, and they should be able to find 2 kills out of this, although Metroid will get credit for the kill. It's Genetics, it takes down Nika eventually. Fought the shut down. Variety's still spinning on to Vote at the back, but Dardez and Vote are working well as a unit to stay as long as they can in this engagement, but this is a great turnaround play from the Kings now. It's Dardez under pressure, surrounded by 3. He's not going to escape the clutches as Twig now gets a double kill, and the Kings have opened themselves up a window to look at the FG.
I think you said it's been getting a little easier time and time. Warriors have initiated the same way each time. Eventually you have to run into a wall, and unfortunately for them it was while there was an EFG up and they lose 4 people in the process. With the tower still standing, 30 seconds left, you can't end the game here, but you're going to get very close if you just wanted to run it down. At least some Phoenixes are going to go down here. It's a lot easier now for the Kings. And look, 10,000 gold, that EFG makes up for that difference. Soon enough, those towers are going to go down and literally make up that difference. This is a moment where the most you're worried about is these fire minions on left, and even those are pretty easily dealt with.
Well, I think on paper, if you look to these 2 squads, you'd expect it to be a back-and-forth encounter. The year so far for Warriors has not been a back-and-forth encounter. However, for this one specific now, it's starting to show just how well these Warriors could look in these engagements. But the Kings have been ruling the roost for a while now, and battling back in this one to now having this enhanced fire giant buff. This is a chance for them to, as you said, maybe get a Phoenix in return. Left and one's respawning at the same time. As the Oni Fury comes up, could be a bit of danger on the menu from the Oni Warriors point of view now. I guess I want to go back to that fight as well, Gore, because it was kind of a weird one. We saw Nika get hit by the chains, and it looked like the front line was very much from the Kings focused on keeping Nika out of the fray. But Neil, meanwhile, initiated to the back line looking at the damage dealers of the Kings, and Warriors weren't really in a position to continue that fight to begin with. It felt like a forced situation almost.
It kind of fell into this conversation where you could see that Neil is in this area of setup only. He can't get it done by himself. Nika's close to getting it done by himself, but still needs the backup. And they kind of separated the two, right? Nika and Neil were on this island compared to where the carries were. You weren't able to get Dardez and Vote's damage as readily available to the fight. They burned down BMT pretty quickly, but after that, there was just enough degrees of separation that you couldn't get back to where you needed to on the Kings to slow them down. I don't know how many times, if you run that fight back, the Kings actually win it. I think they are able to just read that one particularly well at the very beginning. I think there's a lot of chances for the Warriors to do what they've been doing up to this point, even with the EFG on the other side.
Perfect decision-making so far from Camelot Kings with this enhanced fire giant buff, because the Oni minions are now pushing down left, right, and the middle lane too, but they're able to just split the difference before the towers as well. Bad news is it looks like Variety did go back to base there, so I don't think we'll see too much more come out of this for the time being. But the FG, you know, you've got another minute and a half on it, so maybe you wait around and look for a pick in the next couple of minutes.
Slows them down just a little bit, but you've got a minute and a half left. That's at least a Phoenix, or you would hope so, at least a Phoenix.
Well,
Look at all
wait,
these minions.
what?
What's going on over here?
How did he get over there without getting him checked? That's
Look
ridiculous.
at all the minions.
Nobody saw him coming in there, but like you said, all those minions combining with Twig. Great play out of Twig there. Recognizing there's a window, the Oni Warriors just got caught with their pants down, and now they lose a Phoenix on the right-hand side. Harder task now for Warriors to defend. Keep an eye on Nika on the front line. He'll be looking for a blink engage, as there's a 2v2 in mid, all in on Twig. Twig's taking a brunt of damage, though. He will use his ultimate to try and escape the winds of Smash, but instead he's still in Phoenix range. The rotation comes through from the Warriors from the left-hand side, along with the Kings, and Big Man Tig's taking a ton too. Nika's still trying to chase him down, and the ultimate comes through just in time. He gets a good route off, and then in comes the rest of the team to support. Netroid has to peel himself away. Janex can't do that, and now Variety's left alone with Netroid as the Oni Warriors defend their base. And here we go again, the next FG.
I mean, that kill onto Twig, it feels a little bit more like the Phoenix did most of the work, but then the team made up for that difference, more than made up for that difference when they jump into the engagement afterward. A good, just direct line towards BMT and Netroid. Netroid had, like you said, peeled for himself just to stay alive, and even so barely was able to get out of that one. Genetics, unfortunately, falls down there, but I think he would have rather made that trade than lose Netroid and BMT.
Look at this play. Look at this play. Straight down mid they go in. Middle Phoenix is exposed, and they've left Nika back to try and delay some bases. And let's be honest, as long as Variety doesn't get back here, Netroid can do something.
Yeah.
But against 3 members of this quality, this could be a bit of an issue. Cancel that. 4 members. He can only really watch on as his Phoenix goes down or ends up dying himself. Has to use the Bifrost away. Twig respawns just to see his middle Phoenix fall.
And they're going to have to back off here, but remember, left Phoenix is still weakened from being taken down earlier, so they have an easy access there.
Variety got some good window onto Vote there, and it's allowing Twig to get into the pit too. The pressure on Vote is all in. Will he get a kill response on Twig is the question.
One shot!
No, he misses the snipe. Twig credit for the kill. Meanwhile, Variety's still trying to give chase to the rest of the team. Bad news is the rest of the Kings are not nearby, but all of them being alive, Gore, and Vote being dead, this is King's window to go for the FG again.
I mean, it's going to create the opportunity, and just as it respawns, 50 seconds without Vote. That is something I didn't expect to look down and see. A long time that he's going to be sitting in the penalty box. It makes it a lot easier to have that window easily open.
It's been a while since we've had a bit of a meta where it's going 40, 50 minutes in games for the most part. And then people always forget how long those respawns are. And we're not even really towards the end of this game just yet. Right to the front line, though, trying to deal with Neil more. The chains out from Janex to slow him down. Neil took more damage than bargained for there. No escape coming through. Ragnarok force, and Nika beads it away. Into the clutches, though. Neil Mar drags one, and it's Genetics. But the Thorns will prevent Neil and Dardes doing any damage. Chain off the mark means Dardes will escape for now. FG back on the case. Netroid pulling it.
Still in a good spot to try and get aggressive, but look at all the relics. There's just beads down for Vote. He's not alive yet, so you're not worried about that. They're really in a good spot to fight back in for the Warriors.
I actually thought Nika used his beads in that last engagement from the no escape, but no, it was the ultimate he used. Used that CC immunity effectively. And Kings do not feel confident about that FG fight whatsoever. As you mentioned, relic situation, it's not bad for everyone. There's just a bit of lacklusterness on the side of Kings for engagement with those blinks being down.
Well, good news for Tings. He's about to have his Aegis back. He's needed that. He has not been comfortable. He's not been peeled for at a lot of these fights. He's getting the Zeros treatment is the way I'd describe it. They should be able to get this fire time, though, thanks to his ult.
Good chains out of Genetics, just trying to keep Nika at bay, but Nika's just trying to give vision for the rest of the team to come on through. Apple was fired and did some damage after the south side of Vote. Kings get out of the FG, but what happens afterwards? Twig's trapped against Cubo Fred for the time being, getting some support from Big Man Tings. Drop kick into the wall means Cubo Fred should find the kill. Meanwhile, Genetics left on his own there to fall two, and that's 2 kills the way of the Warriors. Yes, they get the FG, but they may lose a Phoenix here. Unless the crazy happens.
I mean, Variety's up. That's enough of a tank to be able to get in front of Netroid and Tings.
They're not going to go for an end here, right?
But if you fight this in the Titan, you got to focus only Titan. It's at 3-4 HP.
No ults.
You might be able to burn it. Dardes does a lot of damage. Nika does a lot of damage. It's risky, but maybe worth it.
Into the Titan room we go, and the Titan's already at half health.
Oh my
Vote's
God.
coming in, but Vote's taken out already. The Titan still stands for moments, but not long enough. Oni Warriors will take the victory off the Camelot Kings here. Wow.
I did not expect that. I'll be honest. I was looking at literally anything but the Titan for the end there, but they read it. And even against 3 people, I don't know that you're going to be as confident running in there as they were, but they didn't seem to have any qualms about it. They made that decision incredibly fast. They had to because of the timers, and jumping into that, you have just enough damage. You don't worry about anything. You don't peel for vote. You don't focus down any kills. You just go for the Titan, and 40 minutes in, they had enough damage.
Well, I mean, take into account as well, they did have 4 tanky targets on that team as
True.
well, so that comes into play. Able to weather the storm of the Titan. Game 1 goes to Warriors. Do we go to 3 games, though? We're going to take a quick break, and after that, we'll come back and find out exactly what happens in Game 2.
Welcome back to the group phase of the Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League, brought to you by, of course, our friends over at Alienware. And I want to give shout-outs to Alienware as often as we can because they're giving us some sweet gear here to work with this season in the SMITE Pro League. Make sure to head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code SMITEAW at checkout to grab some Alienware gear of your own, and maybe it'll make you as good as these pro players, and maybe not. Likely not, but hey, when you want to stream, you'll do it in picture-perfect quality, as Mike would say. Oni Warriors come out hot here in game number 1. Taco joins me to break this one down. Look, Taco, we figured there would be this onslaught of engage from the Kings. We saw some moments where that was the case, but it just felt like the Oni Warriors, maybe even specifically Nika in this one, Neil as well on that front line, just felt a little unstoppable.
There was definitely a lot of back and forth action taking place between these two teams, and I do feel like some of that is credited to the fact that these guys are just familiar with each other. When you factor in the mix of European and North American play style, at the end of the day, they've all been playing with or against each other for years, and I was definitely extremely impressed. This was probably my favorite play of the day. The attentiveness that you need to recognize that Twig is about to look for that windfire wheel. Such a beautiful block by Neilma, arguably one of the plays that helped that collapse even lead into the game win.
Right, think about the context. The Camelot Kings are pushing in under the mid lane Phoenix there. It's kind of a back and forth fight. No one had won it yet. That ultimate from Twig connects, and suddenly things looking a lot better for the Camelot Kings. One of the guys we mentioned going into this segment is Nika on this Kilcullen. Tall task to go up against a King Arthur in lane and kind of out-pressure a King Arthur, but we've seen this Kilcullen as an option in trying to counteract a lot of that. Nika with an 11 KDA, 32,000 damage, looked great on the front line for the Warriors here in Game 1.
Nico was just doing it all that you could possibly ask for out of your solo lane front line. He just made life super difficult for Twig and Big Man Tings, was not really allowing Twig to have as much freebie momentum as he was looking for, I think, off of the Neja. And more importantly, I love how well Nico was able to basically control where Genetics was trying to initiate. Genetics just... I love the idea behind the Ares. I don't think that the Ares really came all the way into fruition. And again, there were definitely some really solid moments here for the Kings, but the counter collapses from the Warriors was very impressive. And this is kind of the frontline step up that we were hoping for out of both, or at least out of Neil Ma, because Nika has definitely looked great so far.
No, agreed. And Neil Ma has had those moments so far through Season 8, hasn't found it consistently, but now this Oni Warriors team in 3 straight games in the group phases, they won back-to-back against the Solar Scarabs. Now Game 1 here against the Kings. Remember, if you're looking at the tier list, just the standings going into this group phase, Dragons and then Kings and then Scarabs and then Warriors. Warriors were technically the bottom team standings-wise, and they have started to play so much better than that, and a chance now to force an all-important matchup on Sunday between the Kings and the Scarabs, so that would be something to watch. But there is still a Game 2 and potentially a Game 3. It's going to be tough, though. You look towards the Camelot Kings, maybe the team that has to adjust something in picks and bans.
It might be a little bit difficult, I think, for the Kings to get a solid read on the Oni Warriors in terms of what they're going to be looking to prioritize. I mean, you can always assume that there's going to be, again, that heavy frontline focus with just trying to remove as many, I guess, team setup options as possible, but leaving open picks like the Kilcullen, leaving open picks like the King Arthur, that could really go either way for both of these solo laners, and respectively, I would probably anticipate the focus to really centralize around the supports.
And remember in picks and bans for Game 1, Genetics in the last 6 games has played Ymir, Yemoja, and Fafnir, and all 3 of those were banned against Genetics, forcing him on the Ares. We say force, I mean, we figured that would slot in pretty nicely with the composition the Kings had, but if you're really trying to take away those power picks, makes some sense to get the Ymir off the table, get the Yemoja off the table. So I don't necessarily imagine we see all that much of a divergence, there we go, from game number 1 as far as bans go. Sobek's going to get taken away here as well. So this is really showing us the strength, the relative strength of these two supports. and their ability to play deep into their god pools. The Fenrir, though, the first big pivot in the ban column.
Both these teams can recognize where there is a lot of talent available, and certainly frontline control just seeming to be everything when these two teams were actually looking for those later team fights.
Wow.
I mean, when you factor in that Camelot Kings were able to collect a enhanced Fire Giant, and still Warriors managed to bounce back. Twig even stripping away the right Phoenix, a total freebie, by the way, from what seemed like a little bit of miscommunication out of the Warriors. The resilience to bounce back there is definitely impressive, and I love the fact that they're opting for that Chiron yet again for vote. There is a small chance that it could be a general flex pick because Darda is certainly known for being able to play those hunters in the mid lane as well. But I was also really impressed by the Discordia, a little bit more, I don't want to say off meta necessarily, but she definitely has her risk versus reward factors, and I think that the execution was certainly clean from him.
I know we like the Chiron first pick here, but King Arthur there in game number 1, despite a loss for Variety, was still able to do, I think, second to top damage there in that game, so it was very, very high up. And the Coquelin gets banned out here, so are you concerned at all about the solo lane pick now for the Oni Warriors? That Coquelin gets banned out, King Arthur is locked in. Maybe we assume this is an Osiris then out of the solo lane.
Could potentially be an Osiris in the solo lane. Could definitely also be an Osiris being flexed into the jungle. Really wouldn't put it past the Warriors to be a little bit more diverse in that matter, but I'm looking at this Fafnir.
Yeah,
Wilson. This is a pick that I think has really been on the up and up for the pro scene, and he has a lot of control, especially around objective play. And the hammer stuns, if you are consistent at landing them, such great CC, and it really makes things a lot easier to be Dardes because the follow-up's so much easier to find when you have so many different forms of control.
And the Giannis now provides a form of control for the Camelot Kings. Giannis has been in such an interesting position, especially discussion-wise online. There's a lot of back and forth. We saw Zeros, though, effectively negated from the set earlier on today. He got Giannis in back-to-back games. So what's the key in your mind? You see a Giannis locked in on the other team. How do you keep it from getting to the point where, you know, everyone thinks he's just the best god in the game and anyone can play it?
Well, Warriors have already started doing that.
Sure.
I think that when you're looking at the Chiron, Fafnir, Osiris, this top 3 has a lot of chase potential behind it. Fafnir, even after he goes into that transformation of the dragon form, he's going to be able to have his cooldowns reset. And that is not an easy task for a Giannis if King's idea here is to try and utilize that Giannis mobility to try and initiate fights. Fafnir is great at just stopping everything in its tracks. I am really keeping an eye on what Neil is doing with this Fafnir, but so far as the top 3 is concerned, I definitely think that the Warriors have a slight edge over the Kings.
Yeah, and then, you know, Giannis tends to kind of be a wild card if you're able to work your way around a lot of that reinitiation from Neil. You're setting yourself up for some level of success. Now Medusa is in such an interesting spot where we've seen Medusa a couple of times, again, kind of mitigated back and forth success, the ability to kind of clear, I guess, early on, depending on what you choose to level there in that lane. Why Medusa here for Netrioid?
I think the Medusa idea is really just because Chiron can kind of struggle against some of her laning phase clear. She has that spit that's really good at not only taking out the wave, but you can also have a little bit of poke potential. Not to mention Chiron having a dash as his primary form of an escape, can't escape that petrify. So you can still get that damage application, even if he's going to have the possibility to cleanse the slow if he's not looking directly into it. But Medusa does feel a little awkward here just because the primary form of setup that the Kings are working with is really going to be coming from that King Arthur, possibly Blink ultimates, I'd imagine. And then Gilgamesh's ultimate can make it, like, when the vision is obscured, that's obviously an ideal situation for a Medusa.
Of course.
But at the same time, you are Medusa into Osiris and Fafnir, and that is a living hell as an ADC.
Right, and Netrioid is going to have to position near perfectly, you have to imagine. And this is all on the back, again, of just the top 3 that we've seen from the Oni Warriors. Really specifically, this Fafnir is what we've kind of zoned in on. Sensing the Kings still need their mid laner, or the Warriors, excuse me, still need their mid laner, which they do. Discordia gets taken away from Dardes. An interesting pivot there. Raijin has seen an increase in play, but that leaves this Ra open as well as the Nemesis. Do the Oni Warriors draft their final 2 in a way that you're happy with?
I think the Nemesis might be a little bit shaky to start, but what were we looking for in the first game? We were looking for the Oni Warriors to largely just try and stalemate the laning phase up until they could lead into that mid-late game team fighting portion, and they executed extremely well once they got their builds online. That made their team fight a little bit more in unison, and I'm seeing a lot of slow application from this Oni Warriors lineup so far, and I don't really see a whole, like, granted, Giannis definitely has a little bit of a speed mobility for the rest of the team, but that's still not a guarantee of really being able to get away. A lot of range, especially coming out of this Chiron and Raw, so the carries from the Oni Warriors don't necessarily have to be as up close and personal to get their damage off.
And one thing then, with all this front line that we've talked about that the Oni Warriors have, then you have to wonder, where do the Kings find their initiation? We've talked about the King Arthur a little bit, the Gilgamesh as well. Now this Terra pick is interesting. Genetics hasn't played this one recently, not in the last 6 or 7 games, but at 15%, it's his most played god over all of Season 8. So this is something that Genetics has found some success on. Do you think there's a chance for a good Terra game here in Game 2?
Terra is definitely a little bit more of a niche pickup here. Certainly some comfort behind that as well. I think the main issue for Genetics on this one is that Fafnir is just an awkward support to try and contrast. And I think that out of the remaining options, Terra was probably his best bet because you can look to try and find that Monolith stun after he goes into the Dragon transformation for his ultimate. It'll be cool to see how it plays out.
This dual lane is going to be a lot of fun to watch. Oni Warriors versus Camelot Kings. Game 2, Hindu Man, take it away.
So much, Dave, and yes, it is Game 2, but it's Oni Warriors up 1-0, and Gore, coming to you real quick. Walk me through what exactly happens if Warriors win this. Does that mean, like, Kings versus Scarabs is winner goes and loser doesn't make it?
Yeah, so it gets to that weird area. They'd both be 1 and 2.
Right.
And because they're tied, it'd be head-to-head, so it's whoever wins that set, right? If they actually, no, wait, the Scarabs are 0 and 2. So there might be a world where if they win tomorrow...
We'll work it out. Maybe I came too early on that.
I need to see the numbers in front of me. There's some weird math, but it is way more important now for the Kings to win this set. And if they lose here, Sunday becomes a lot more interesting for the Kings.
That's for sure. I mean, right now, though, let's just see if they can get themselves back in this game. And the draft they've got here this time round, little bit, in my opinion, it wasn't like last draft was, different. But this Giannis in mid lane kind of opens the map up a little bit differently for the Kings this time round here, Gore. And I think this is time for Big Man Tings to try and shine once again in the mid lane, although he's up against Dordes on his Raw. And we'll see how this one works out. Not a ton of setup for these Raw snipes like we saw out of the Kings in Game 1. As we check in with the duo lane early on, you can see Vote already at level 2, and that's exactly what you have to do against the Chiron. Sit back and accept defeat on wave 1.
This is my fate. This is what it's going to be like for a little while. You're Medusa anyway. You're not necessarily worried. First 5 levels, you're probably just relaxing. Then you start to really hit your stride, and I think the fight back will become a little more prominent. I'm also excited to see it. It's not something that we get to talk about often. It doesn't come up often either, but Medusa does have anti-heal on that lacerate, so I'm curious to see if that will play a role either against Vote or Dardes later on in the game. It's such a small interaction.
Well, it's a great interaction because, funny enough, she's got a couple of issues, with a couple of great opportunities with that gap closing, keeping someone in position for a second. But you are using a lot of engage as a squishy target to get that deep
Let me dash in.
Yeah, there's not even many that really enjoy that. Even like Hachiman's Eye Jutsu, at least you've got an ultimate to escape if you use that, right? You don't necessarily have the same sort of thing with the Medusa.
Yeah.
A couple of things we mentioned on the desk, though, from Taco there as well. The Winds of Shamash from Gilgamesh this game could impact a bit of the sight, and it's not huge, but it will impact some of the sight, so these Petrifieds may make a bit of a difference. And when you look at the squad the Warriors have here, there's a few people that are going to be running at the back line pretty consistently to maybe get that Petrify some use. We'll see how that works out, though, as Netroid at the moment just trying to hold his own in this laning phase as the duo lane so far. The Warriors are slightly in the lead.
Their sensitivity is going to get tested, right? How fast can you flick your mouse away and flick back to stay in the fight and concentrated without losing too much? But even then you get hit by the slow. That's where Vote's cleanse might come through and be a little more prevalent. Taco had mentioned that on the desk as well, but that's going to be something that I don't know if we're going to see it. Well, actually, I think we're going to see it way more often as opposed to the stun. I think the stun has become so rare, and with Athena, who notably hasn't really been looked at this week, despite the fact that she's so prevalent in picks and bans prior to this, and how well she pairs with a Medusa, it's kind of surprising to see her thrown by the wayside,
Well,
considering that helps guarantee some of those.
The real one is the Athena, right? The Athena Medusa taunt combination. Like that was talked as soon as Medusa was released back in the day of like, hey, imagine Athena paired with it. That'd be a great combo. You force him to look at you, and then you hit him with the Petrify soon after. Do notice in terms of relic choices here from Genetics here, I love the Heavenly Agility pickup. Every one of the warriors this game here, Gore, has a slow in their kit. Every single one of them. And if you take that into account, this Heavenly Agility will be very impactful for escaping it. But more importantly, it's there for Nemesis. However, it's got more consequences and more effects than the rest of the team.
It's one of those early game, it's Nemesis. It is, I don't want to have to deal with you. Late game, it's, this is great in a team fight, and this is going to be very helpful.
You've got Masterful Shot from Vote. You've got the Hammer from Neil. Those both slow. Dardes also has the Blind, but it's a slow as well, if you didn't know. Cubo Fred, obviously on Nemesis.
And dice.
Slice and Dice, couple of abilities there. And then Nika.
Just the king, the god of slows.
The guy that wants to keep you slowed forever. So, Heavenly Agility, very useful. Keep an eye on when that gets used. But more importantly, the upgraded variation of the Heavenly Agility that doesn't get talked about or used often enough that once upon a time, I'm really getting back in the old days. It used to be hunters that went for sprint and beads is what it was, because
it gave you haste, right?
And it still does. And that's the thing that people don't really speak about anymore. So it's still got the zoomy effect that you'll get out of this when you upgrade that Heavenly Agility. So just keep an eye out on the whole W key from Twig and maybe the Medusa to run people down and still auto-attack effectively.
Well, now I'm living in like 2015. You remember Vamana? You would run and you'd get the sprint
and
attack
sprint,
speed.
and then you just run even faster.
Glad we don't live in those days anymore. It's just solid now. Think of what Genetics is going to be capable of. I mean, that opens up a lot of conversation to be had, maybe more so for Medusa, but that haste applied to Gilgamesh, applied to Variety, all of a sudden, like, that's going to open up some conversations. Again, I feel like it's going to, well, it has to be more prevalent late game. You have to wait for the upgrade to come through, and I doubt that Genetics is feeling that confident about its capabilities that he's going to buy it in the next few minutes.
Oh, no,
so probably waiting.
Not just yet. He'll get there eventually, though.
One
Just
day.
keep an eye and see how the rest of the relics fall out. Neil, though, gone with the Sunder. A lot more use out of Sunder as of late from these supports. Mainly with the shell changes, a lot of people just don't think they're as impactful. For me, it's still a shell. It still prevents some damage. It just doesn't block full auto attacks, which in the later stages, sure, that will make a difference.
I mean, we saw that in game 1, right? There was a shell that just happened to save the life. I think it was Haddix. It was either Haddix or Lasbra who got out. It was Lasbra. I remember it now. He jumped out just barely because the shell was able to come through. It's still some health. It's still a 50% reduction in the damage you're going to be taking.
Well, damage reduction or healing reduction on Variety there is the ultimate out from Nika. Juggles up from Variety to buy a bit of time to waste that away and get rid of the tether too that was attached. But look at the left-hand side right now. Gank coming in from the Camelot Kings, or at least it looks like it as Twig looks towards Neil Marr. Neil just going to throw out the hammer. No real panic yet because they're trying to force his leap away and then chase him on in. Big man Tings arise, but immediately Neil Marr transforms and wastes a lot of abilities there, honestly, for my liking. Good use out of Neil to buy a bit of time and waste some things, and now it's a bit of a turnaround as Cubo did drop the ultimate but decided not to get aggressive anymore. And I think Cubo could have just held his ult there and just called it a day, but it wasn't too doom and gloom.
It's, those metrics where you technically don't have that damage, and now, okay, this is where you don't want to be. That Yennis portal might seal his fate.
He's still got double dash, though, available, but will he get away in time? The answer is no. Netro does hit him with the spit at the tail end, and that was not worthwhile from Cubo Fred there to go for that exchange, especially when he realized he could be getting wrapped around, and I think he trusted his dual lane a little bit more there to make sure his left-hand side was protected.
Well, it's one of those moments, especially his death, is the few times in Smite where body blocking hurts you more than it helps you. That spit didn't look like it would connect. It was just that distance, but it just gets the spray off. And that's exactly what you need to be able to close that gap. That's the thing Medusa's capable of, a little bit extra range on there. Most of the time you only see it in the minion wave, but when you do see it in a team fight, you have to remember it also goes off her statues later on. So if she is able to kill someone with that Petrify, those are just little statues waiting to turn that acid spray out onto the enemies here for the warriors. And so that's a little bit of damage that can help catch up to Cubo's dashes.
So First Blood does go the way of the Kings. Obviously, overall, 400 gold to Netri. But look at the gold differential between the two. It's actually Warriors still in the lead.
Wow. Even
with that First Blood. And I was just looking at the net worth there. Like, where is this lead really being generated from? And it really is Genetics and Twig not getting as much gold or farm as they may necessarily need at the moment. I should say gold for the most part. They're either splitting more or just not sticking around for it. But that is making a bit of an impact of where the gold stands. The good news is, I guess, the gold on their team is going to the right people. You know, Netri getting that First Blood means he's going to be a little bit more developed in his build as it goes on.
Same thing there. Big Man Tings doing decently enough. Is top of the net worth charts. You know he's feeling confident in himself. And this is a good pick for Yanis as well. Very easy to escape. Like you had mentioned all the slows. Yanis will still be affected by him, but once he gets on the other side of a wall, he's not as stressed out about it. I think his survivability is going to help it out. Tings was just absolutely destroyed. There's no other way to describe it. He was the person getting hunted down in game number 1. It was just a lot easier. Ra, as mobile as he can be, still doesn't necessarily have anything that lets him go over walls, go through walls in the case of Yanis. So it does make it a lot easier for Tings to stay alive. But then it, comes with its own merits. How much he's going to be able to accomplish in the team fight. You lack the healing. I think the pressure right now, looking into the duo lane, might be for a Gold Fury.
It's looking at genetics more than anything else. This is a weird engagement between the two. Genetics has bit off more than he can chew here. He won't be able to clap onto Vote there, who used the ultimate to pick up a kill. I was about to say these two teams have been very respectful of each other in this early stage, but that was a bit of a weird skirmish where Genetics out of position but feels comfortable until he takes the full brunt, for the most part, of the Warriors duo lane. And there's not a whole lot Netroid could really do there to support that.
Yeah, I don't know where he wants to go and what he wants to accomplish. Like, when he ults, in my mind, there's a small window of, okay, now throw up a wall, throw up a pillar, just dash the other way and do whatever you can to get away.
Oh, Ting's in trouble in mid lane. Is the snipe gonna connect? Of course it is! Dardes through the wall, predicts the angle, and big man Tings takes a tumble thanks to a good rotation out of Neil Moore, but more importantly, Dardes there being to help with the pincer maneuver.
I mean, this is something, we saw a couple of free ults coming down from Tings, or I should say non-setup ults. He's just trying to fire them, free fire them, see where they go.
Yeah.
And Neil, Cuvo, anybody who was really about to receive them, either the timing was just off and he was able to get away, or they just sidestepped it, kind of predicting where he's going to predict them going. They're going to have to do that on the Kings now. That is something that you are going to be very in danger of throughout all of this. Maybe not the right phrasing for it.
A look back
you
at
have
exactly
to be
what
really
happened
worried
there,
about
Gus.
it.
You see Big Man's very stepped up, and this is the rapid moment when Tiggs turns around and goes, oh no, I'm in trouble. Oh no, I need to get a pull. Oh no, I got a pull.
I mean,
no.
That's just, whew, that's
Disaster.
easy. Doesn't need vision to know
Where's
he going to go.
I mean, in fairness, he's just guessing he's going to keep running in the same direction back to safety on that side. Tiggs could have used the ultimate there, buy himself a bit more time, maybe ult through a different wall, but now it's Neil a bit far forward here for a moment or two. Twig also on this side, and without that dash available, Neil's going to have to use his ultimate. The actual dropkick was used by Twig, but he won't be able to escape as the burst comes through nicely from the Kings to tie us back up at 2 for 2.
Now, I don't know if they needed to commit that much to kill Neil, but it is a kill nonetheless, right? So at the end of the day, if they can continue the pace of the game the last 10 minutes, most of those ults are going to be back by the time they really need them. Same thing, the relics that they've used so far should come back. Maybe a little bit longer on that Blink and that Heavenly, but either way, it's going to be able to come through and feel confident for the Kings. And they just need something going their way. They've killed off the jungler, killed off the support. They need a little more pressure just across the map entirely.
I mean, the main thing is Netroid's the one with all the kills here, but look at this Twig looking at Cuvo Fred, but Twig jumps over the wall. Snipe again from Dardes! 2 in a row. There's your money.
That one, now watching the movement at the very tail end there, it felt like he thought they would go for the portal for the displacement. Like, that is just one of those moments. Like, Dardes is playing 5D chess. Everyone else is playing checkers at this point. If he can keep sitting these snipes, it's over.
Well, we'll see if it is, because, I mean, at the moment, if you're the Warriors, this is the time to step up and get yourselves together, because they've been struggling all year, but this one against the Kings, a huge set for them with how this group is playing out. Pyromancer below half health right now is reset, but Variety going to pick it up, and Kings are going to get it, but all the while Tings got isolated away from walls there in no man's land as Neil and Dardes collapse again, and Dardes now on a killing spree. I don't think Warriors would be too upset about losing the Pyro, especially if they're going to get kills on someone like this Giannis in mid lane and shut down some of what he can do.
There's a lot of weight on the... I think more for the Warriors. Like, being able to get ahead of yourselves and confirm yourself a playoff spot is going to be way more confidence boosting than I think anything they've done, like you said, over the last few weeks. This is a risky call.
Is it? With a snipe of it. Oh, it is a risky call. Kings, get it. I don't even know what stole that. The snipe was too late. Dardes still pressured by Netroid, but the body buster shield's going to help him out. Netroid can't really do too much. He's taking a ton of damage, though, as well from Neil Moore, who's still trying to run him for the kill. But the bad news is Janex was there. Oh, he will get it. Meanwhile, Dardes now running for his life from Gilgamesh. Guess what? I Like Adventures drop kicked into minions. Dardes will fall eventually.
Wow.
On this left-hand side, but that's a Gold Fury 2 for 1 mid-jungle for a Hunter. I still don't think you're too upset if your Warriors there, but at the same time, it could have been better.
The
Oh no,
wins?
they didn't get the Gold Fury. I'm telling a lie.
Yeah.
That was terrible from the Warriors. My
That's
apologies.
maybe the worst case scenario. You get the, like, yes, technically, hey, you killed Netroid. He's got all the kills. That might be worth something in and of itself, but losing the Fury to the Winds of Shamash of all things, like you have a raw snipe. It's definitely, they're going to feel that one.
Oh, leaping mid lane from Twig, looking for a drop kick and
no.
finds it on Cubo. Fred, the shield will keep him alive. Portal soon after will not do enough damage this time round. Cubo will survive. But now Kings have a bit of wind in their sails for a moment or two now. Last couple of skirmishes have worked out in their favour. And it all really started around the Pyromancer that wasn't the greatest, but then the Gold Fury after that kind of answered things back.
Yeah, keeps things, I want to say comfortably, now actually massively in the lead. I didn't even notice that from the Kings. I mean, that Fury is making up a lot of that gold lead, but what was a couple hundred despite the early lead for the Warriors, it's now turned into a couple thousand. If they can keep up, again, this amount of pressure, this is kind of the way you need to clap back, right? Like, I mean, 13 minutes in, you're not as really ahead as you'd like to be. You need more of this kind of steal. You need more pressure like this.
Well, I can see two fights at the same time. I'm just going to keep it on the right side. You walk me through that play there real quick. It's the Gold Fury steal. It is just a Winds of Shamash.
And it's like the tail end. Like, that is
Yeah.
maybe a half second, if not.
Oh, he did it again! And Cubo was waiting for him too! This is a way of deleting Giannis, my friend. This is a way of deleting him, but it's not all that easy. Cubo, Fred trying to run for his life now as Janex gives chase into the clutches of Dardas and Vote waiting around the corner. The snipes out from Vote are not really hitting home. Meanwhile, though, Twig's in there with a Shamash again. After already stealing the Gold Fury, looks for Dardas and finds him with a drop kick. Punch to the face from Janex is good enough.
Oh,
and
wow.
then soon after, Neil Maher will fall to Netroid, but Nika's in the fray, and the slows are going to come through. Vote gets credit for the kill onto Twig, and Nika's still got his ult available. May look for some more here, but needs to be careful because there's 3 men round this corner, and instead of chasing, will walk away.
2 for 2, but it's mid for mid, jungle for support. That's the difference maker. I think better for the Warriors. At the end of the day, even if they are still slightly behind, I'm still kind of floored with the fact that it is just a half a second early, I guess, for Dardas on that ult and for the Fury, just for those Winds of Shamash to come through, or Sands, whichever one it is. Either way, solid for Twig to get that. Not so solid for the follow-up. This is where I'm starting to get a little more worried for the Warriors. I think the Kings, I should say. They adapted to the draft really well. I think they banned out a lot of the problems that they had in game number 1 and kind of drafted around those well. But I feel like if you lose game 1, especially to the way the Warriors have been playing this year, you kind of want to come stomp them out in game 2 and 3 if you're going to try and get yourselves a very solid win. Now it's still just a coin flip.
However, if you're a Warriors fan, and like, honestly, there is plenty of them out there, and they've all been like, listen, this might not be our year till the end of the year. We might just have to wait for them all to get here. But the way this is playing, this is giving them hope of like, yo, we can scrap. We have the ability here. And Genetics is a little bit far forward in the jungle here, trying to strip the Scorpion. Thing is, though, they're not sure where space and time is, and there it comes. Fired on through by Big Nanting, so relieving that pressure early. All the while, Netroid farming up this left-hand side and getting some good tower damage in, and will bring down that tier 1. But now that space and time's down, Oni Warriors are clumped here, maybe looking to turn this one around and continue the chase. Don't think Kings are going to give them the window, though. They'll back away, happy with the result on the left-hand side.
Once they got around that Gold Fury pit, Cuvo's trajectory, his line to try and get to the back line and at least slow some people down, disappeared. I kind of like the call, though. Like, you waste a lot from the Camelots, or at least an ult from the Kings, and you're not too stressed out. You didn't really expend too much on the side of the Warriors. In fact, you spent nothing on the side of the Warriors. You can get yourselves ready for this Pyromancer you had mentioned a couple of minutes ago coming up. Doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of a contest, and this is where that Raw comes in. Same conversation as game number 1, just flipped sides. The Warriors theoretically should have better secure, although so far this game hadn't quite been the case.
Yeah, 2 in a row. The Kings have just managed to take him away from the Warriors 2 times in a row, and this one will go relatively uncontested at the tail of there. Dardas just wasn't in range to look for a snipe, and so Kings just walk in, get the pyro, walk away again. Slowly but surely, Kings are developing a little bit more of a lead. Every single one of these neutral objectives respawns.
And it's small steps. It's trudging steps at this point, but it's steps nonetheless. They are making progress forward. And even though it hasn't made a big swing, there's now an Oni Fury on the left-hand side for them to try and pick up. Twig has been having a really solid game. I mean, 1, 2, and 5 maybe doesn't necessarily scream this is a great game for the jungle, but he's been able to control a lot of the backline, control Dardas and Vote a little bit better, even Cuvo to a certain extent. That if you let him get into the backline, or even just slightly in the front line, he's going to displace you and make it harder for the Warriors.
No, I agree with you. I mean, Twig's flash line, like you said, it doesn't look great, but when you think about the fact he's been involved in every single kill, of those 6. As Netro gets aggressive against Vote, we were talking about the lacerate usage, and there it was just then. Vote is already dead, and all he can do is return a bit of fire back. Meanwhile, in the jungle, the rest of the Kings setting up for the Oni Fury. And the Oni Warriors, meanwhile, may only get a tier 1 in mid if they're lucky. You see the pings on the right-hand side as Warriors are like, go check these camps, but there's nothing really available there. Camelot Kings now have an Oni Fury down, so these minions will spawn on through.
Yeah.
And the lead continues to grow.
Those waves are going to be just a pain. I mean, overall, like, at least in left and right, because your tier 1's down, maybe you're not as stressed about their pressure over there. Tier 2s should be able to hold their own slightly better. But now you've lost all your tier 1, so it's one of those take it with a grain of salt. It's not going to hurt you as badly, but it's because you're already losing in terms of that pressure. Not necessarily where you'd like to be. This has been a lot cleaner from the Kings. I mean, each step of the way, it feels like they're just slightly ahead of the Warriors, save for Dardez's ult, which just seemed to be a little more and more on point. But the Warriors' grouping hasn't necessarily been matching up with what they had in game number 1. It's definitely not matching up with the Kings so far in game 2. And that's been causing them a lot of suffering. I mean, Nika's not been able to rotate into the backline the same way. And unfortunately for Vote, especially after that death, he's not really had the through line to just free cast from the backline.
Over the years, though, we've always seen in SMITE that individual players on teams do not carry the whole series, the whole day. And this is a good example of Camelot Kings here, just showing how much of a good team they are. Because Big Man Tings in the mid lane hasn't done much of anything this game. The Giannis has been effectively neutralized outside of the use of the poles for the team, obviously. Yeah. But he's been effectively neutralized, and then you look and go, well, where is the rest of the carry coming from? It's not variety this game.
Nope.
He's 0-0-0. It really has been Twig, Netroid, and Genetics that have really carried the brunt of this team. And that's what you need to win championships. That's what they've always said to me anyway. It's a team game.
And you have to look at it, I mean, team game and team play. Like, Genetics has the best team fight ultimate when it comes down to it. Like, Terra is just so good at that. But he's also gone for that Heavenly, and you had mentioned those slows earlier. A lot of the control the Warriors would otherwise have effectively negated whenever Genetics is in town.
And you can see King's getting very aggressive on this left-hand side. Now level 19 for Netroid. And with 4 members strong here, it won't take too long for a tier 2 to fall. What can they do under the tier 2, though, is a question. Genetics going to hold on and tank this for a little bit. The backdoor protections will slowly be removed, but it's still whittled down. And no one on Warriors can really engage. 5-on-5 pressure relieved for now as Kings head through the jungle and find themselves a lovely little red buff available.
This is one of those moments where it doesn't necessarily matter how the fights and the kills have been falling. The gold lead has just been such a slow, steady incline for the Kings that it's really starting to get felt. I mean, they're getting to the point where, yeah, 7,000, pushing to the upwards of 8,000. They get another couple of these towers, they're going to be able to break through the 10K mark and not stress too much about it. But it's getting them items, maybe a hair online, just a little faster. You can see, I guess, with all of the gold that they still probably have in their pockets. There's now a Divine Ruin online for Genetics, which is going to be helpful in the middle of these fights. The Staff of Mirrodin once again picked up for Tings, but that's going to give them a little more burst damage. But the tier 1s that are slowly but surely going to evolve there for Variety and Twig, the gold effect is really going to start to be felt in the next couple of fights, and that's troublesome for the Warriors. You really start to feel the impact of these items now.
I like the adaptation as well out of the Kings here, given, like you said, the Divine Ruin to Genetics here. It is something you'd expect at your mage in the mid lane with Giannis, but with Giannis having a tough time so far this game, allowing your support to, you know, carry some of the brunt of like, hey, I'm going to do more of the utility for you, so you can focus on just raw power and damage in these engagements, and that is why you can see that Staff Mirrodin online. And it also looks like he's going for the Rodder Tahuti as his final item before he looks towards selling off those boots.
Sometimes you just need pure power. I guess it could technically be a Charon's. That'd feel really late for a Charon's.
Actually, no, you're right. He's probably good. He is like a little bit of pen in this, so it is a Charon's actually. Yeah. I just like Rodder Tahuti, man. Like,
yeah, it's good raw power. It is
greedy, man. I see someone at half health when I'm playing a mage. This is why I play supports. But if I see someone at half health, I want to smack him in the face because I know I'm going to do even more damage to him. Maybe even get a cheeky kill. Fire Giant though started up at 21 minutes. Drop kick onto Neil Marr. Neil half health leaps away. Wants to hold on to his ultimate if he can, but he's taking more damage from Twig. Nika trying to separate for him, but all this focus on Neil is not going to give him much time to transform. And when he does, is he going to get away? The answer's no. The tether now down from Nika. He's going to go Lord of the Afterlife over the wall onto Twig. Great individual play from Nika to make it a 1-for-1 support for Jungler. And that is pressure relieved at the FG. And a lot of that really was Nika.
If they had Neil, if it had been Cuvo who died, honestly, like looking at somebody else on the team who might be expendable, you keep that coerce up, you might be able to get pressure on the Fire Giant if you're the Warriors after that fight, or at least continue the fight into the Kings. But now it looks like it's going to ultimately just be a Pyromancer. That's the best case scenario. If you're going to lose that fight, or I guess go even in that fight, is that you lose the smaller of the two objectives. But now you have to be prepared for a Gold Fury on the other side.
And with the amount of commit that we see onto Neilmar there out of the squad from Kings, all that investment to try and pick off this Fafnir early on is fantastic. But it's, can they turn it around? Can they get away from the engagement after the fact? And Warriors are at least punish them in those situations where they do all in the Fafnir. Now, ward placements around the FG. Plenty of sentry wards down from both teams. But at the moment, it's just swinging King's way. And neither team really feeling too confident. Vote going to return to this left-hand side for a moment. I wonder if Kings feel confident about maybe looking around the FG again, seeing him over there. But not this time for now. And Vote recognizing that A, he can't stay in that lane too long because they'll go FG. Or B, he's overextended with no tier 1 or tier 2 tower, and a Giannis could arrive.
Yeah, it's something that you got to be worried about at any given time if that health is up for Tings. He's there, and not just him. It's everybody that's going to be able to drop in.
The Goon Squad.
We have seen a lot of team fights, a lot of games that have been turned just because one person just happened to be a little too far forward. And now it's going to be the pressure. Again, Gold Fury is a very big power point here, but I'm really looking towards the Warriors where they're going to be able to fight. I think they're only concerned about Fire Giant right now. Like, Gold is a massive deficit for them, and it's going to just continue getting bigger if they keep losing. But the Fire Giant's their way to equalize that. I mean, there's 6 towers standing for the Kings. That's so much gold that's just on the map for them to pick up. So the Warriors, especially with Coerce available, with all their relics up now, save for the Heavenly there for Nika, they feel pretty good to go into this, but it's the engage. I mean, Cuvo hasn't been able to get to the backline pretty consistently. We just saw what happens in all-in onto Neil. Dardes doesn't have secure setup for himself, but might be able to find some good ults. There's a lot of execution thresholds for the Warriors to jump over.
And I do like, as well, when you look at Camelot Kings' composition here and the way they've played the game more specifically, this chokehold they've got in the game now where they are slowly choking the life out of the Warriors by picking apart all these objectives. And when something goes wrong, instead of trying to continue lifting him in this chokehold, they're just like, okay, readjust the grip, reset for a second, and then we'll dance to the FG again because they don't want to make a mistake and give a window. They have to be aware, though, and this is the big one, Gore. At this FG, there is a Ra, and Ra could come up at any moment.
I mean, you have to watch where he is right now. Furthest away from the Fire Giant, but that's because they know the fight's about to happen.
And Neil's the first one in there to try and cause a bit of the Kings getting a bit too aggressive if they can. Just force a reset, but FG reset again. And Kings are trying to bait him into a fight. That's what it feels like, but FG's dropping very, very low quickly. Neilmar gets a hammer off on Tings, and Tings has already used his bees to escape. Dropkick from Twig keeps him busy as Variety was zoning away Nika for now. Patience from Warriors so far, although Nika took a ton of damage, has to ult away. Janeg still giving chase. Meanwhile, in the back of the fight, it's Variety looking at Vote, who's pinned inside and in an awkward spot around those winds of Smash. So is Neilmar as he drops through a portal to his demise as well. 3 members of Warriors dead, and that's exactly what Kings were after. Best case scenario for them, as now the FG is exposed.
And normally this is where I start going, oh, Dardes, Ross, he used it so kind of awkwardly in that fight. I would even say they didn't really get a lot of damage for it. I don't know where the idea was or what the idea was there for the Warriors, but ultimately makes life a lot easier for the Kings. Hey, now you're 11,000 gold up, and you've got a Fire Giant. Pretty much your best case scenario. 20 seconds before Neil respawns, 30 on Nika and Vote. That's enough pressure to be able to get at least 1 Phoenix, maybe 2 here, depending on whether or not they want to focus down the tier 2 and mid or run it straight over to left.
Oh, just go for the end,
really?
Baby go. It looks like they feel very confident in it. They want to return it.
10 seconds.
The Kings have come back and battled hard, but what can Cuvo do? Not a lot. Those crits did a ton of damage. Sniper and Dardes did some work, and with Neil respawning, the Titan's still going to end up falling down here as Kings take the game in 26 minutes. We went from a 40-minute slobber knocker into a 26 minutes. What went wrong? And it really was consistent steals is the only thing I can really say.
I mean, I think that first Gold Fury steal is like the thing that just makes it abysmal for the Warriors, right? I think if that goes well for the Warriors, we're probably in another 35-ish minute game, but the draft from that point forward felt really good for the Kings, and I think that really helped them adapt well to what went wrong in Game 1. And there was never a point where it felt like a true solid grip for the Warriors to go into a fight, unfortunately. I think they maybe need to shake up their draft or shake up their early game because that just went too far towards the Kings.
Well, we'll find out what they do in Game 3. For now, we'll go to a quick break.
And just like that, we've got a Game 3 on the menu between the Oni Warriors and the Camelot Kings. You are watching the SPL Season 8, of course sponsored by our friends over at Alienware. So we always want to give a shout-out to our friends at Alienware. Make sure to go to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code SMITEAW if you want to pick up some of the sweet Alienware gear. Look, the only way Gore can keep track of all the stats and I can reference them is with these awesome laptops. No way any ounce of processing power less would get those stats on my screen. So shout-outs to Alienware one more time for sponsoring us here in Season 8 of the SPL. And Taco, we've got a Game 3. It looked like the Oni Warriors might have been pushing this one to a 2-0, but then some moments come up for the Kings, and the Kings are able to push us one more.
And it's crazy to think that the Kings were able to bounce back because early on, that momentum just felt like Warriors had such a firm chokehold over the Kings, especially Dardes really getting things going. He got such a nice snipe onto Tings, gave Tings a little bit of his own medicine finally, and still unable to really close the gap to seal this one out.
Well, it feels like there's a big shift in this game on that first highlight where Captain Twig just kind of walks in, drops the Winds of Shamash, and out-confirms a Searing Pain from Ra with one tick, what felt like, of that Gilgamesh ultimate. And time again, it felt like Netrioid was the one benefiting from the last bits of damage in a lot of these fights. And this Medusa, we wondered how it would look, ended up finding some great value here in this game.
And Netrioid just had so much patience with his positioning on this Medusa. And notice how a lot of these clips, well, not necessarily this last one, but the ones leading up to it, he was oftentimes sitting well far back enough, letting the front line kind of do their thing, letting Genetics create some space, and more importantly, between Genetics and Captain Twig, having great spacing and just really controlling the escape routes from the Oni Warriors makes it so much easier for that Medusa Petrify to come in after the fact with a big cleanup crew.
Look, Netrioid has 17,000 damage in this game. That's good for 4,000 higher than even what Dardes was able to do on the other side on that Ra. When it felt like those Searing Pains were hitting constantly, you'd figured, you know, the damage numbers might maybe even be higher there for Dardes. So Netrioid able to pull out plenty of damage there in game number 2. And this becomes ever so important now. This game 3, so important for the group implications, the playoff implications. Because if the Oni Warriors win this one, they're in. I think they might be in anyway, depending on how head-to-head works. There's some situations where if the Oni Warriors lose and the Kings lose, you got a bunch of head-to-head things going on there. To reiterate one more time, if the Oni Warriors win, Kings versus Scarabs on Sunday, and that's it. Whoever wins that matchup is the one that goes to the Phase 1 playoffs. So we know that the Scarabs are probably at home right now hoping that the Oni Warriors are able to take this one because that makes their path to the Phase 1 playoffs a lot easier. But let's jump into picks and bans for game number 3 and see how this one breaks down. Very similar to what we've seen so far up to this point. Tiamat still banned out in game 1, game 2, now game 3. And then a mirror of the bans, though, from game 2. Remember, slight pivots there for the Kings. They take away the Fenrir after game 1. They take away the Kukulkan after game 1. And they'll stick with the same series of bans for game 3.
And speaking of adjustments, Oni Warriors actually prioritizing that Gilgamesh right off the bat. They've been looking for Chiron on a couple of different instances. Almost curious if it's going to be a response now from the Kings. But Gilgamesh doesn't necessarily imply that it's going to be in the jungle. Again, a really nice flex pick option to open up with. I like the idea here from the Oni Warriors, though, to just strip that one away from Captain Twig, not looking to have to worry about any more Fire Giant steals in the future, at least.
Well, giving King Arthur and Chiron over to the Camelot. Look, you're playing with Fire the more often you give Variety this King Arthur pick, it feels like. Remember, game 1, despite a loss, Variety had ridiculous damage numbers on the King Arthur, just a little bit behind what the Kukulkan was able to do for Nika. But then pairing that with the Chiron now for the Camelot Kings, you got to figure the Kings are thrilled with the way their first 2 picks have gone.
I'm sure they're probably happy with the way that their draft is shaping up so far, but at the same time, you have to look across at what the Oni Warriors are doing, and I like the unison between the Gilgamesh and the Sun Wukong. Both great characters, I think, at really just being able to collapse on a backline, probably apply a little bit more pressure onto that Chiron. Don't really want to let Netrioid have any more freedom throughout these teamfight engagements, and the Terra, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Genetics, I think, making the right decision here to look for that frontline pick early on, because I have no doubts in my mind it would have been a target ban for the 4th and 5th picks.
Right, now that was a big shift from game 1 to game 2, where it felt like the backline of the Kings in game 1 just didn't have space to operate, and then in game 2, Talked about how the Medusa had unlimited space to operate, it feels like. Maybe a change there for the Oni Warriors. The Soul gets brought out as well. Now, there have been a few players in the league who have taken the Soul, gone to the mid lane a couple of times, seen it in Hunter once or twice here as well. Tends to go more ability-based out of the build, the Spear of the Magus, formatting pretty well into the Soul pick here. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the picks. I'm not going to ask you to predict mid or Hunter, but how do you like the Soul pick in general with the Gilgamesh and the Sun Wukong on either side?
I don't really see. It's not that I don't think Vote could play Soul.
Sure.
I'm sure that, with his given mechanics, he could definitely make it work. But this is for sure a pick that I'd much rather see go into the mid lane. That Disapparate, I think, such an important tool early on at just helping to create some survivability. Because that is one thing that I think Dardes has kind of struggled with at times. And Soul's kind of got a get out of jail free card with Disapparate, plus the itemization buffs recently, sort of elevating her to a point where I think she just fits a little bit better in mid than that duo lane right now.
And we'll have to see how the Camelot Kings adjust to that. The Ra gets banned out, so that means the Kings still sensing that there is maybe flex potential out of this Soul over to that Hunter side. On the other side, Terra gets locked in now for the Camelot Kings. And so there's still ban presence going towards Neoma, the Fafnir off the table, the Sobek, as well as the Fenrir, and then the Ymir is gone, the Emoja's gone as well. So both of these supports have felt like they've just been digging so deep into those god pools. And now that you've given Genetics Terra, the Oni Warriors, well, obviously you're going to have to draft something for a Neoma down the stretch here. And the Camelot Kings can't take any more away from Neoma. So I'm excited to see where Neil goes. But Discordia here, this is one that Big Man Tings, I think, has the ability to play at a very high level.
I was trying to decide between whether it would be a Raijin pickup potentially or the Discordia, and I like it here for what the Camelot Kings have drafted so far. I think between the Terra route, that's really solid setup to catch, I think, the Oni Warriors off guard if they're looking to be just a little bit too aggressive. And not only that, but it's a great force out of that Soul Disapparate, maybe making... Again, I'm assuming that it's Dardes on the Soul pick here, but I do believe that applies like a little bit of extra pressure in these engagements and actually cancel that Neath pick. Does that
clear it up for you at all?
I mean,
I don't know.
I was certain before seeing the Neath draw some question marks now. I still want to say that is Neath for Vote, Soul for Dardes, just because I do like the Neath contrast to the Chiron. And Neath has kind of been a sleeper pick. I don't think that teams are really engaging her as a weak god. I think that she's just more so kind of a niche factor.
Sure. And look, the ultimate there is such a wild card to deal with, where it feels like everything's going your way. You're chilling in, say, solo lane, you're hanging out, and then suddenly you get pinned by a Neath ultimate and you die to a gank that you never saw coming, something like that. So that flexibility, I think, is going to be very important here for the Oni Warriors. Now, an interesting pick for the Camelot Kings as well, Taco. They're going to round out their draft here with the Daji. Does it make some sense?
I love the Daji pick here, especially when you think about what Daji does best, and that's punish gods who don't have that immediate CC immunity in their ults. It's going to be a tough time, whether it's Dardes or Vo on that Neath. She will have some issues, I think, in these teamfight engagements because there's a lot of AoE control that I'm seeing so far from the Kings, and I'm just not really sold on the disengagement levels between the Cerberus and the Gilgamesh. It looks good on paper, but we all know how much of a surprise the team fights can be at times.
What do you think the win condition then becomes for this Oni Warriors draft? How does this team beat the Camelot Kings in Game 3?
A really strong early game.
Sure. Yeah. Fair enough. Just get aggressive in the early and try to find that damage. And Neoma had the ability to do that on the Fenrir earlier on in this set. Now has to look towards something like the Cerberus, which is able to do some big damage early on in this game. Remember, this one very, very important. I'll rehash it for you. Game 3. This determines whether the Solar Scarabs and the Camelot Kings have a winner-take-all on Sunday, or we've got some interesting situations in the mix. One final time, Oni Warriors and Kings face off.
Definitely an interesting set, and it has been so far. Gormizer joining me again now for game number 3 to see how this one plays out between the two and exactly what happens next. Meanwhile, with how this begins, look at this, Twig and Variety on the right-hand side early on, and that's going to keep it going.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this. I think this Discordia is going to become a lot more problematic, not because of the Discordia herself, but because of the passive that we got to see, and that's what came into the equation what was that, game 2, game 1? I mean, Nika was able to utilize that one very well. And I have a feeling Variety, as the one who should be getting it, should be able to dish out a lot of damage as the game goes on. That's going to be a very scary thought. King Arthur doesn't really need any boosts already. I think him getting some from the Discordia is going to be troublesome, but that's like 15-minute, 18-minute talk.
Yeah.
That's not first 15-minute talk.
Well, I do want to mention this Neath in mid lane for Dardes here. It was brought up on the desk a little bit of like, maybe it's for dual lane. I did expect it to go mid because I feel those World Weavers make a bit more of an impact when their travel time is equidistant, is the way I'm going to kind of talk about that, especially when you know what's going on in each of the lanes. So let's see how Dardes can make this work. It's definitely been something he's gone to once upon a time in the past. He was very much a hunter player when needed, and it can put a bit more pressure in this mid lane area, at least make it an even keel. A lot of potential damage out, but what can the dual lane do is going to be the question. But more importantly, the Dargy. Oh, Vote is in a ton of pressure. The Giddy Up did brutal work there.
Wow.
And the beads were not consumed. I don't know if it would have saved him, even if he did.
I don't think so. So maybe better that he doesn't use that. Now he can at least avoid one. No, not even the gank. I was going to say gank from the Neath. That's not going to be happening. That's on his team. But now Neil has to be careful.
Bad. This is terrible for the dual lane out of Warriors now. Neilmar just going to try and limp away and buy as much time as he can. There's a lot of investment from Kings here on this gank, I would say, in terms of minion loss. But with Neil just going to chase him around for a little while longer.
At least he's bought time.
Does he die for this?
Does he die to the tower? He died to the tower!
That's insane that they got that kill, if I'm honest. And Netro is like, okay, yeah. He dies, but great work from support. Honestly, in Neil's position there, like, he bought time for his team. He got to respawn him from Vote, so he didn't really lose much in the wave, I guess, with no pressure. But it was still very unfortunate and a good example of exactly what Chiron can do in the early game. And I would say specifically because of the pairing with the Terror this game too, it allows for the easy setup to make that happen.
That's so much easier, like you said, for him to displace people. Not something that I'm used to talking about with Chiron. Like, yes, displacement has been a key portion for him, but not usually knocking them backwards and then making it so much easier. Now that Neil's back, Vote's back, it's still going to be problematic. I mean, you've got a level lead there, at least for Netrioid. Should be at least half a level for Genetics, if not maybe a little more, with 2 assists. But they're going to feel the brunt of that for a little while.
And honestly, with the early game power spike that Chiron's going to have, it makes sense that Sol's going to struggle a little bit now and be further behind, have to turtle a little bit more. So expect to see some more of this, where Cuvo rotates over to Duo, supports them, make sure they at least get the buffs, because they're not going to have pressure in this lane for quite a while now. So Duo lane deficit early on, and exactly what can the Kings do with that lead? When do we see Terra leave this Duo lane and start to rotate to put pressure elsewhere?
I think there's a lot of pressure, not just on Genetics, but really Twig. Like, there's a lot that you have to be worried about throughout this game. In fact, Twig's looking good right now.
Oh, great jump away from Twig, though. He read it like a book. He realized what was going on, and beads were used by Dardes. Dardes stood and took a fight, and that's what was going on there. He realized he could take a 1v1, and he knew he had backup coming, and maybe, just maybe, he could bait Twig into an awkward spot, but it nearly came at his life. At the end of the day, it cost him his beads for that attempt. And now a bit of a trickier spot now for Dardes, especially with Twig gonna get that Paolo online soon.
Yeah, once he ticks over to 5, not only the beads down, but no CC immunity anywhere else for that Neath. I mean, even in your ult, you're not that safe. In fact, you're rooted. You're the opposite of safe. You're stuck in place. Makes it a lot easier for Twig to potentially lock down this Neath. And something that has been, I want to say, crucial, that she's been a must-pick for all teams, for the Valkyries lately. I mean, almost a must-ban against them. If they go Chronos Neath, it seems so powerful at the beginning of last week, and the way they were able to play it, something that has been showcased to what potential it can bring, but nobody else has been really playing her as much. I'm excited to see if Dardes is going to be able to make it look as good, but right now it's starting to feel like it's going to be in danger more often than not, showcasing kind of the downsides that she brings as well. Global presence is great. Your mobility, your survivability does tank a little bit.
Telegraphed is a big key.
Yeah.
However, the changes to a backflip over the years have helped her a little bit. You know, it's not as easy. I did like what we saw in the dual lane there from the Only Warriors for a second or two. You saw Netro trying to get back to base as quick as he could to try and make sure he bought some of these items, invested some of that gold, get his boots online. But the delays just allowed Vote to catch up a little bit more and get closer towards 5 before he has to return to that lane where he expects to take a bit more brunt of pressure. Kiva Fred going to pay a visit again to this purple buff, continuing to help out his team, and he will be level 5 alongside Vote. So the level differential between the two in the duo lane isn't as bad as it once was, based off the first and second kills.
Honestly, really solid for him. And I think that goes to show, like, getting, first off, the first blood bounty. It blows my mind. There's 2 kills in the game, but we have to acknowledge that it just says 1 up at the top of the screen. But only getting that first blood bounty, not getting credit for the second kill, is probably what's hurt Netroid the most. Like, otherwise, I mean, yeah, level 6 to 5, he just ticked over there. Vote is probably a third of the way through level 5 now, so he's got enough of a lead on Netroid to feel comfortable. He can feel confident in his abilities. But level 6 to level 5 doesn't mean too much. He already hit the peak at level 5, so now we're looking towards the late game, and that's plenty of time for Vote to just relax, come back online. Soul's definitely going to start hitting her peak soon as well.
Well, both junglers just continuing to farm away. We saw a little skirmish earlier on, and you can see the lane phrase in the duo lane. They're looking for Vote to return. And maybe look for a blink play early on. Vote clearly recognizing something could be up here, hanging to that left-hand side, waiting patiently. As soon as he steps up, there's the blink play. Walls off the mark. Vote, who's the early on, gets into separate form. World Weaver comes through, but a great use of the ultimate from Netroid there. Immune the World Weaver, so you can still get the damage out to secure the kill on Vote. And Vote did have beads, but they would have helped him there anyway. He even avoided the wall there.
Yeah, I mean, that might have just been the best sequence of events for the Kings that it could have possibly been. Like, you burn a couple of ults from Vote, you burn an ult from Dardes, you don't burn the beads, so maybe there's, like you said, a small caveat, some safety still technically there for Vote. But that's 2 deaths now, and they haven't helped him once.
Gotta give credit to Kings, though. That was patience out of that duo lane. Like, they could have pulled the trigger at any moment, but they were really patient and waited for Sol to extend far enough that there was no way she was going to get back to that tier 2 safely. Now Neil surrounded by 3 as Vote returns from base. Neil up in and claps onto the walls. Will get chipped away at, trying to hold on to his ultimate because it won't really help him out. And at the end of the day, he's just going to fall down. Netroid getting another kill, and Chiron, well, he's off to the races, so to speak, and he's looking at the purple buff now. Giddy up, Horsey, here we go. He'll force a Vote away as 4 members of the Kings still around this left-hand side of the map.
Well, good news, bad news. Good news is, the Kings, if you're a Kings fan, is that they are very, well, having a dominating performance right now. Netrio's 3-0, that feels good. 4 assists there for Genetics. You've got a 1,000 gold lead. But the good news if you're the Warriors, despite the fact that your duo lane is now 0-4 collectively and has been just kind of beat up, nobody else is really losing. So at that point, maybe Nika, Cuvo, Dardes can kind of be some pillars for you to come back to. I think Vote and Neil, as time goes on, are going to feel solid. But now we're starting to see the level discrepancy come through. That's where things get a little more troublesome. 6 to 7 for supports, with 6 to 8 there for the carries. And so Vote's definitely going to have to do a lot more safe style play to make sure he catches up.
And you kind of think to yourself then, if your Warriors try and play around the right-hand side of the map, maybe get some kills in solo lane. But then when you look at solo lane, you go, wait, that's a King Arthur? I don't think we're going to get many kills with a Gilgamesh Sun Wukong, unfortunately, in that matchup. So maybe you're looking a little bit more towards what will happen around Gold Fuse, around FGs. In terms of secure, my team's amazing. Dardes flips away, Power out up, beads are available and will need to be consumed, and done so after the second shot hits. I like the use of that Twig there to fire multiple bolts too. See if you can get an early beads maybe, and then secondly, follow up with further damage just in case.
I mean, there's no one else to hit, no one else to focus down, get what you can get done. Not having that Palo... No, this is one of those weird moments. Technically, it's a good teamfight ultimate that's down with the Gold Fury having just spawned.
There's a ward there, Dardes.
But I don't think he's worried.
There's a ward. I don't know.
I'm going to sit here and be noticed.
I think he knew there was a ward there after he got hit by all that damage. That was a ton, by the way, that Dardes just ate to the face, and that will force him back to base with no beads this time round. But I'm surprised by what that was set up for. I mean, there was only really Neil around. Nobody else was really in the area just yet.
Yeah.
And now Neil under pressure now because they saw that Dardes had to go back to base. Apple off the mark. Ultimate used. Big Man Tings will slip away, as will Netroid. Netroid didn't even use the beads there. Self-cleanse, I believe, is what came into play to relieve the pressure. But ult exchange between Neil and Genex keeps Neil alive. Vote needs some help, though, because the collapse is now on him. Because over here is Captain Twig, and Vote forced out again. However, Cubo Fred into the fray. And finally, a kill on the board for the Warriors. A defense of the purple buff. And Genetics and Netroid have to turn tail.
Finally able to jump in, get something done for themselves. Like, granted, it's killing Twig, I guess worthwhile for Kivo. Maybe not as worthwhile as getting someone like Netroid, but Still, anything is better than nothing at this point for the Warriors. I'm really surprised how well
Netroid giddy up. He was waiting for an
away.
ability, and the root comes through from Genetics. Not really finding
have
it all
ult?
the wall, but the dash will. And that's a nice pickup again from the Kings. They thought they had an opportunity there, and the giddy up for the second time. That isn't used, like you were saying, as aggressively as we normally see. Maybe level 2, you normally see teams back away because they realize that's a thing. But Netroid's really using the level lead here and the advantage of I can close the gap. And if you leap away, I can probably still catch you.
I really like the way he's been aggressive with it, and the fact that he's been able to time his ults really well to dodge out things or just to make him feel awkward, right? Neil or Vote are going to die there. It doesn't necessarily matter which one. Someone is going to go down. And they've been able to find themselves a lead. Maybe not the most worthwhile trade. You still lose your jungler at the grand scheme of things, but yeah, you're still winning. You're still ahead by 600 gold.
And credit where it's due. I mean, having a blink on Terror as well to blink on in and continue that follow-up helps life out a lot more. So dual lane for the LA Warriors really under pressure in the 2v2s. When they've got a bit of support, though, from the jungler, things have turned around a little bit. Survivability's been there, but it's been a scrappy endeavour so far, and the Kings have come out on top there. And you can tell that, basically, based off the fact there's only 4 kills in the game, technically, for the Kings. However, there's an extra assist on the side of Netroid, who's been involved in everything.
Weird number 5 that he's been a part of, considering the 4 they were able to confirm. Neil, I think Neil did themselves such a huge favor making sure that goes that way, but now it might be Netroid in danger.
Well, giddy up will get him away for a moment. As soon as it connects, he uses the beads to drop away. Now Vote looking for an ultimate if required. There's the ultimate drop down. Good combination out of them, but 1-for-1 exchange very early on. Vote exploded thanks to Twig, and now Cubo Fred, who came in here, is under a ton of pressure too. It's Neilmar pulled back into danger. Genetics couldn't do much about it, and they'll leave Neilmar on his own on the island to try and just hold on as long as he can. Apple thrown out by Ting's not really needed as Twig gets credit for the kill as junglers come to the dual lane again.
I mean, looks good. I actually think as much as it sucks to lose your dual lane again, and still ultimately more worthwhile for the Kings, at least you got Netroid, right? I mean, 3-1 and 3,
That's
it
true.
feels
That's
like a really good kill to pick up if you're the Warriors, of all the people that you can find. But at that point, I'm really grasping at straws for a consolation prize, right? I mean, they have not been able to find a lot of control. Despite all of that, though, Hindu, I mean, they're not far behind.
Yeah,
like, the kills
gold.
are absolutely abysmal. Levels is starting to feel it, but gold is fine.
Cubo got aggressive against Twig, who was a bit greedy, but he knew he could be greedy because he had Variety and Tings in tow. And now Variety's just going to run Cubo down. His leap was already used. It's only going to take a bit more chasing out of Variety, and a bit of help from Fire Giant and Bluestone there to secure that kill. Cubo Fred tumbles in the jungle looking for the pick on Twig.
Now, I mean, who's going to get aggressive? Like, Neil? It hadn't been going too well for you. I don't know if you're the one that I'm pushing too far forward just yet. You have the Neath. We haven't really gotten to talk too much about Dardez's ults because they've only happened, what, once where it's been really, really effective. And now I'm looking more towards when the Kings are going to start grouping up for a Gold Fury.
There was a game a couple of weeks ago where I was like, what did Vote do wrong? And like, it's the same thing again.
They're just beating on him for no reason.
Look at the sentry wards that Camelot Kings have in that dual lane.
Why
to try
two?
And prevent vision. Well, it's because they probably overfought it and like, both bought one. But at the same time, like, they're really trying to keep him pinned back in this lane as much as possible. This 2-level lead, as you were just saying, is the only real discrepancy because the gold differential isn't as much as you would have expected with how dominant it felt so far.
Yeah, that last fight helped kind of extend things a little further for the Kings, but prior to that, it was 200 gold. It did not mean anything.
I mean, I guess the thing is, you're looking at how Nika's doing there. He's about a level and a half ahead, I would say, give or take. It's probably a level ahead at the moment of Variety. So doing a good job of keeping him pinned back and finding some farm to keep his team in this one. You're definitely looking for this Sun Wukong to make an impact in the fights, and I think that's one of the reasons they've drafted it here too.
Yeah.
Because we've seen a couple of variations out of Nika. This will be a troublesome one for the backline to deal with, specifically that Discordia, who had a hard time getting picked off last game.
Yeah, I mean, and she's got some self-peel, not enough to stop a Wukong, and that's going to be the danger. I think Big Antings is going to feel a lot of that pressure throughout this game. But it only matters when the rotations start coming over. We're starting to see Nika explore a lot more. In fact, he's starting to make a through line. He might come over to try and fight for this gold tier.
Because this gold fury is being looked at. That's why, yeah, as you said, Neilmar, though, eats a bit of damage from Genetics. Not too much, though. And as soon as the call comes that, hey, solo lane's missing, the Kings realise there could have been a rotation coming through, so they back away and give up any sort of pressure on the gold for now. Variety, meanwhile, going to get aggressive in the jungle. Blue buff is available on this right-hand side. And he may look to try and take a 1v1. I think he's just going to keep his eyes on the junglers, though, because you can see Gilgamesh making his way through the jungle right now to this right side, too.
It's definitely been a change of pace here for the Kings in the sense that they dominated very hard early on. No, they don't need to, and they're not too worried about it. Yeah, like they just kind of slowed down. It does mean that if you're a Warriors fan and you're rooting for them, it's giving them a lot more time to catch up. I mean, look at the levels. Not only is Nika ahead, but Vote, while still down, isn't as far out of it as he was earlier, and it's making things a lot easier for them to fight back into this. 2-7, I mean, 5 kills separating them means nothing. 15-ish 100 gold, more like 14. Really isn't going to be enough when you split it across all 5 members to make that big a difference. It's only 300 gold for them. It's a little more vision, and you can see the wards that are coming out from the Kings, but it's not enough to write home about that I think the Kings are running away with this game the way it felt like they should be.
Not just yet, but the amount of damage to Julian's causing a problem. Big damage, though, onto Big Man Tinks from that fully stacked Transcendence World Weaver. Neilmar still stepping on forward and keeping Twig and Genex busy, but Twig going to continue the chase on Neil there. He's overextended, but he does have support coming in. Gets 2 big items out there. The Relic of Beads on Dardes and on the ultimate on Neil too. But can he get away against the question? Kubo took way more damage than bargained for. Nika is into the fray with the Somersault Cloud early. Still Neilmar stepping up and causing problems for Genetics, who's taking a ton of damage. Nika gets a kill on Twig finally, but Neil should fall soon after thanks to Variety as Nika gets to the backline and the solo lane has come into play and once minorly outdoes the other.
I mean, that is ultimately better for Nika than any, like, I mean, what, on top of the fact
he's
that he got a double kill, he's going back in!
And now Big Man takes under a lot of pressure, Jingu bang, and
no way he goes for 4.
You see if the solo lane is alone like that, Gore. Nah, I don't think he does. Not this time. Or maybe. He heard you.
He's got the damage. He's got a 3-level lead there for the carries.
All
Maybe
the while,
he's looking more to zoom out for the Gold Fury.
Yeah, I was looking at the Gold Fury and I'm like, that's going to take a long time with you two boys. I mean, you've got a bit of damage, but with how things have gone so far, it might take a little bit longer and Variety will stick around. But a great battle back from the Warriors there.
Yes.
A lot of that set up from the solo laners rotations. A very weird skirmish where, in my opinion, Twig did a great job in that engagement with the power out to keep the pressure rolling, but a good answer back from the Oni Warriors.
I think that was a brilliant start. Like you said, it burned Neil's ult, it burned Dardez's beads. It feels like it's something that should be nothing but accomplishing, and it does effectively kill off Neil.
Yeah.
But it comes at the cost of Tings as well as himself and Genetics. So, yes, you get some good proactive plays leading the way, but we're right back where we were before. Yes, a couple of kills that are separating it, good fights from the Kings. I think showcases exactly what you had said earlier, what Nika can do in these team fights. And that is something to be worried about.
Dardes needs help, and he's calling for it. In comes Kubo for it to help him out. Aegis bought him a moment or two, but where you're going to go now is Twig lands those power gets one on Kubo, gets the beads, and Nika does not have beads available right now, so he's under a bit of pressure, has to cloud away as 5 members of Kings all stacked up. This could be an opportunity for a Gold Fury if they so choose at this moment in time. The Warriors may be in a bit of a trickier task defending this.
They're definitely hungry for the win, though. That's where I'm looking at for the Warriors. I mean, you know they feel the pressure. Not just because if they lose this game, things get a little more precarious for them, but I mean, being able to take down a team like the Kings would be so monumental for them. Unfortunately, now they're going to be even further behind, and maybe they're going to get a consolation prize. But this is just awkward territory. Their beads, their Aegises are getting forced out in these awkward scenarios before the fight. And then they can't do much in the fight.
And that's the power out that you have from Dargy, so instrumental and impactful.
It's a really good
last pick. Cause problems, you know? And was it last pick?
Yeah, that was their last lock-in.
Well, tell me if you we're weaving for Netroid here, and Netroid under pressure. Aegis is early, beads early. Still doesn't get CC'd though, and that bought him enough time to continue the chase with a giddy up to secure that kill. He had his ultimate the whole time then, and didn't even bother using it.
I mean, he uses his beads and his Aegis in that scenario though, so it's scales, right? Is it worth killing Vote for all that?
For me, I think he mistimed his Aegis, in my opinion. Like, he went Aegis too early. He went, okay, if I beats now, I should at least be able to still follow up with damage and not get stunned. That's exactly how it played out. Over to the right-hand side, we tune in, and Nika still with a slight lead over Variety, who both of them have been impactful so far as we approach this midpoint in the game. With the Gold Fury being down for a moment or two, I expect just focus on farming once again.
This is where things get precarious. This is the weirdest point in the game. We're 18 minutes in. This is typically where Fire Giant starts to be a conversation, but I don't think either of these teams feel really confident in their capabilities to do a Fire Giant right now, so I don't expect to see it for a few more minutes. It's all about where you can create fights, create pressure. With no Furies available, no Pyromancer up for you to get pressure on, it starts looking at jungle buffs. Well, I just happen to be able to see, at least for us, that the Warriors just got all of theirs. Same thing for the Kings. It looks like Genetics, Tings, Netroid are roaming around. I'm looking at Twig more than anybody. That powwow, whenever it's up, just creates fights for them.
Definitely does. And this fight between the two supports is always an interesting one to see how it plays out. Difficult matchup there for Neil Mar specifically, just because Genex is knock-up immune too when it comes to the ultimate situation between those two playing out. But now grouping from Kings in the mid lane. 4 members strong, looking for this tier 1 tower. Neil Mar trying to keep them busy on this left-hand side to buy time, but Dardes can't get in to defend the tower on his own. Has to be careful about how far he steps up. Still has beads available though. Variety gets rooted for a second in the jungle. Janex taking a ton of damage from Cuvo as Twig now jumps in. Paolo available. Looks for Cuvo Freddy. Beads early on. And that's the end of the Paolo. Just one set of beads consumed there from Cuvo.
Paolo, but Netroid also popped his ult there. Got a couple of shots off, but didn't really find too much for their trouble. 2 ults down, and now with those relics down, that means that Netroid feels like a pretty easy target. Granted, Giddy Up still's a nice escape, but is it going to be nice enough? Well, if the Warriors play as passively as they have, I guess, yeah.
I think the bigger thing there is the fact that now Cuvo doesn't have his beads available. Gilgamesh is a little bit susceptible to a lot of CC, which means his engagements are going to have to be very well timed from Cuvo Fred this game. He's going to have to choose when he wants to blink or leap on into these. More than likely with a blink, though, you want to kind of blink in, save your leap to maybe do follow-up or escape the situation. We'll just keep an eye on what happens in the next couple of minutes. But the good news is there's nothing really on the map for the Kings to look to try and abuse and force Cuvo to take a fight he doesn't want to at the moment. Instead, it's only the Fire Giant. As you said, I agree. I don't think either team will be too confident just yet in their ability to do that.
And that comes down to like your I guess burst capabilities. Like Neath, hey, if you throw a couple of weaves down there and you can hit them all with a Spirit Arrow, yeah, that's a great amount of burst. How much preparation are you going to have at a Fire Giant pit to have 3 weaves waiting for you? It's just not going to happen the way I think the Warriors need. And yeah, Discordia does a lot of damage. Apple isn't really the end-all be-all of Secure. So I think both of these teams are in maybe too risky of a scenario. I think Soul, Chiron, Neath, I mean, what we just saw, Gilgamesh, I think everybody has steal potential here. And so you're going to need to be really confident to start things up. Luckily, the Kings are just looking for fights.
Paolo up, beads down. Cuvo did get hit straight away by Variety, but the focus was on Dardes in this area there. Cuvo was just taken out of the fight by Variety completely, and now Nika, who was trying to wrap around the back and get some pressure on Big Man Tings, at least gets the apple out of him. Has to somersault Cloud away, but the chase is still on. The wall collapses down. Great knock-up from Variety too. Nika still can't escape the damage as Twig now gets a double kill. And in the mid lane, you can see Netroid was making this rotation round because now it's Fire Giant time, and it did come down to the pressure of those beads.
Well, and they know where Vote is on the other side of the planet, so they don't have to worry about that. Everybody else should be visible now thanks to the minions in mid. This is looking like a free and feeling like a free Fire Giant. A very good amount of control. This is the first time I think I felt like the Kings, even though they've had the lead, are actually in the lead. 5,000 gold, plus they have the Fire Giant. This is really going to start controlling the map. And it might just be because they've only gotten up to that point. 1 tower taken down. Now there's 2, 4 still standing here, but that's a lot of gold that'll go into their pockets. This finally feels like something that's going to turn into potentially a team that could snowball to the win.
Tings being looked at in the mid lane. Will Weaver coming on through for him as well. Did get the Will Weaver off before he got into the stealth option. And now Cuvo Fred should get the kill. Rest of the team of Kings, though, got the tier 2 tower and immediately try and collapse middle area. Won't be able to find anything there for now. But look at left-hand side. Variety rotating round. May be able to find Cuvo. Cuvo leaps away. Now Twig looking at Neil in mid for a second. Pressure relieved. But Fire Giant still on 4 members of the Kings. And the Primal Fury is available.
And Palau's still up for Twig, so not only are they going to be able to get a Primal, there's beads down for Cuvo, and they should be able to call that one out. Dardes Vote going to be safe from that one, but a lot of pressure still capable for the Kings here. I like the fact that the Warriors are fighting back, though. Like, again, it's one of those moments where the Kings finally, like, they're the first time in this game, feel like they have some sort of lead. And the Warriors are still treating it as if they're just slightly ahead because, admittedly, at the grand scheme of SMITE, they are just barely ahead at this point.
In fairness, go back to Game 1. It felt like an eternity ago in 1 second, but at the same time, no, it was a 40-plus minute game.
Yeah.
But Game 1, it was all Kings early. Warriors got one good team fight, and all of a sudden, we were back to an even keel again. And as long as the Warriors don't lose a Phoenix, that's always the big thing for me, is a Phoenix more than anything else.
Yeah.
If you can hold the Phoenixes, you are still in the game with a decent enough shot. The longer the game goes on, though, a couple of kills later, respawn times take a while, the game opens up.
The big problem is for the Warriors, it's Nika and Cuvo. Like, it's pretty much just the Nika and Cuvo show. I think Dardes, Vote, and Neil have done a lot to set them up. They've done good damage for assists and things like that. But, I mean, look, 0-2, 0-5, 0-4. They're not the ones getting the kills right now. So if you can deal with Nika early on or deal with Cuvo early on, much like that last fight, it makes things seem a lot easier for the Kings to knock down these towers.
I think the problem is, though, is they're just not very tanky, those two, as well. They've got a little bit of tankiness to them, but not a ton.
Yeah.
So they've got to really time their abilities and usage of these engagements of how long they can stay in them wisely. Tier 2 tower being looked at by Kings now. 4 members with the FG still for another minute and a half. And Variety's still in the mid lane here. Dardes look for a shot onto Twig, and Twig will immediately ult that World Weaver straight away. Pulled in his 2 members into the crushing walls. And no one there for follow-up from Kings. Or is there? The root comes through and Neil's still trapped. Leaps over the wall to the tier 2 tower. And Kings, well, they didn't really get too much out of the Warriors there, but the power now is down, as is the World Weaver. And onto the tier 2 they go again.
That was a fun little dance move between the two of them. Again, not a lot taken down, but now Neil looking like he might go down. The damage is good.
And he will get taken out straight afterwards. Neil did get his up down on. Twig though to the back line, gets out of Dardes and makes sure he's in the fountain again. Cuvo leaps in, has to leap out. As Variety marches on into the throne room, the walls come through. And Genetics is there to keep the follow-up damage rolling and vote off dealing damage too. Nika's on his somersault cloud at the moment with not much he can do about that one. This left-hand Phoenix is falling quickly. Nika might be able to get a consolation kill, but it'll probably commit his life and maybe the game if he goes for it. And instead, he's going to have to turn tail as the chase is now on for him from Netrud, who puts in a ton of damage there.
I mean, they still have 30 seconds left on the Fire Giant. This is the safe call. Look, after everything I've seen today, safe call was not the one I was prepared to make. I was thinking they were just going to rush it down. They were low enough that they needed to be scared, but Nika was on the other side of the world running into the Titan room. It wouldn't just vote that you had to worry about. Now, they're definitely going to be looking tier 2, knock that down. Doesn't matter how much time is left on the Fire Giant. You got a Phoenix.
Yep.
You got what you need. You've got a lot of gold. I'm looking at starter items that are about to get upgraded, items that are going to be finalized, or anything else that is going to be able to come through. Upgrades for the relics as well at this point. And a pretty clean start to the next Fire Giant with a comfy gold lead.
Definitely feels like the pace of this game has changed again, though. I mean, Kings just starting to run away with it a little bit more now. The left-hand Phoenix going down. Realistically, I mean, a couple of them getting picked apart in the jungle there. It was an elongated engage that started off with a World Weaver from Twig. Sorry, from Dardes that hits Twig, and Twig responds with the power, pulling both tanks in to an extent. And then the tail of the tape after that was like, well, the chase was on, and it was Neil Marr who got picked up by the scruff of the neck and destroyed as Variety came around the back. And that just opened the window for a tier 2 and the Phoenix in the following fight. Fire Giant spawns, though, momentarily. And the question is, if you're any Warriors, do you look to defend this one? Because the way the Phoenix defense went, they didn't even get a chance to have one. Do you go for a steal?
Honestly, I think their pressure, like the pressure they have around a Fire Giant pit is nice. Palau's going to be problematic for him, but that's the big number one. Beads are still down, actually, for Nika, Vote, and Cuvo, so it makes it maybe even easier for Captain Twig to be the one that can change the pace of this game. But I think the Warriors have to have presence here, because like you said, that Phoenix fight doesn't give me a whole lot of hope that they're going to be able to sit back and fight back a full Fire Giant at King. So I'm looking for steals here, maybe just being able to secure yourself a fight on its own. Neil should be able to aggress.
And if you're Kings right now, take your time. There's minions pushing down left-hand side. Those fire minions are going to keep working their way towards the Titan, open the door of a game end even if this fight goes their way. So why not bait out the FG a little bit? Force the Oni Warriors back. The vision isn't the greatest in the world from the Kings' point of view. Millions of pings everywhere as the Kings recognize. Ping, ping, ping. Left-hand side, those fire minions are doing the work for us right now. Just relax, be patient, and force them in.
I mean, Neil's going to be occupied. There's the Palau. They're looking to burn down the front line immediately.
Brutal onto Neil Marr, but Neil will use his ult to escape for now. Good little knock-up of the two onto Genetics and Variety, but it won't be a lot. Nika got bursted heavily as the Titan now under attack from those minions. The fight's still going on as Variety going to continue the chase down onto the backline carries here, and Dardes has to step up and prevent his carries from falling. Though got a pretty good ultimate off there, funny enough there, just onto the backline, dissuade the Kings from continuing to aggress, but they do have the option of falling back towards the FG pit, and Warriors do not want to regress at the moment.
Surprised to see him go for the Pyromancer first here, but doesn't seem like it's going to change too much, right? They get one.
FG's down.
Maybe thinking the Warriors are, I was going to say back off or something. I don't know what I expected, but that was way faster than I thought it was going to happen. Fire minions on left have been dealt with, but Hindu, I mean, there's not been a lot of presence from the Warriors these last few fights.
No, there really hasn't. I think, honestly, if you look at it, I mean, the dual lane is behind and trying to play catch-up. They're not really involved in many of these skirmishes. In the front line, it's not super tanky without Neil Marr there. Neil's trying to do what he can, but he's been caught in some very unfortunate circumstances, in my opinion. maybe some self-induced ones too, but they are focusing him consistently in these fights to allow him from engaging. Kings get the right-hand Phoenix now, and the writing's starting to be on the walls for me that Kings are looking good for the group stage.
I mean, it feels confident at this point. Game 1, like you said, I mean, it goes for an extended amount of time. It looks good for the Warriors, but games 2 and 3 so far have been mostly controlled by the Kings. This one a little more back and forth. Same thing for game 2 at the beginning, back and forth. But ultimately, the lead showing exactly where it goes. Now with this Fire Giant, granted not enhanced, so they are still going to have to, well, at least want the help of minions.
I mean, when your dual lane gets blown up at level 2, you're going to have a
They're
hard
0-10.
time and be fighting back. And Neil, though, gets in here big, looking to get some Cursed Onk off there to cause some problems for the team too. And maybe they can get in there, but Cubo Freddy's the focal target out from the Kings.
Can they get the kill,
and
though?
they do get the kill on
Look
him.
how low they are.
Nika, though, gets all the big man things, and Nika's still trying to do what he can. Gets the kill onto the 2 carries now, does Nika. This Sun Wukong has made an impact where he can. All the while, though, Twig realizing that fight is not going the way they wanted, will make sure he assists in making sure that Phoenix goes down. Wasn't really needed, though. Nika and Neil getting in combination there with Cubo Fred. That's about time. It's the first time they've initiated themselves in a minute where it's gone effective.
I mean, it's the same thing that fight had earlier, right? That was just all Nika. It doesn't necessarily matter where everybody else is. Nika comes in. He's 5-1. He is the one that is keeping this alive right now for the Warriors. I think maybe not just any other solo laner, but the way he's playing Wukong, everything right now is dependent on him. That's 2 fights he's saved this game. Unfortunately for the Warriors, it's not going to be consistent. It's not going to happen every single time. You have to have something else.
It's so funny. I want to follow Nika through these fights too, Go, just to see exactly how he's getting all this damage off to the carries. But there's so much action on the other side coming up with ultimate after ultimate. And now Nika forced to use a Somersault Cloud in mid there. Not really sure if it's the best idea. He will be able to get away for the time being. And this is all the Warriors just trying to stall out for now. But look at the damage that Genetics can do. Level 20 versus level 20. Divine Ruin does help out, but also the dot damage too. And the explosion from the Pridwin. Vote gets soloed by Genetics there.
Not much you can do about that one. That's all I'll say. I mean, you're getting chased down. Look, he's at 1-5. I'm not going to give him any more trouble than the Kings are.
The only thing I could say is, like, maybe you just stand and bang because there's no other escape.
True.
And maybe
Turn
you'll
around
go
and
down
fight.
helper. Sometimes that's the best form, especially when you've got Typhons too.
Yeah.
You can resustain up a little bit. Whether that was the right decision or not, it don't matter. It's a 4v5 now on the middle of Phoenix once again. Both left and right are already down. The tanks do not care too much, but look at Neilmar around the back. Ton of damage onto Netroid there. And going to get the ultimate off on to Big Man Tings, followed by the Cursed Onk 2. Nika now wrapping around the back again, looking towards the carries one more time. Genetic still frontline and tanking up that for no reason on that Phoenix line. And a failed attempt to the Phoenix in mid again from the Kings. They're going to fall back. FG was still up, but they don't feel comfortable. And even with Vote dead, they couldn't close the game out.
If I'm looking at this, I think I go Primal Fury right now. I mean, you've got 30 seconds left on a Fire Giant that's not going to be able to do a whole ton.
Yeah, I'm just realizing what I'm saying there, because I was like, why do they just go for an end? Well, I guess if all your relics are on freaking cooldown, maybe you should probably play it safer for the timing. Don't make a mistake the same as game 1, maybe. So take the Primal Fury instead, guarantee yourself the Enhanced Fire Giant, and look to close it out. But the question is, can the Warriors ward deep enough to get vision of where they're going to come from, these Kings? And maybe they can get an engage again where Neil, Cuvo, and Nika start to terrorize the backline once more, because they've not looked impenetrable, this backline.
Yeah.
When they do get dove on, it does come up fruitful for the Warriors.
And that's the thing. I mean, Tings and Netroid were stopped instantly during the last siege on mid. It didn't necessarily matter whether or not they were present. But there's 2 Phoenixes down. I mean, Wright's going to respawn here. The minion wave looks like it's pushed up enough. About a wave and a half, maybe slightly over that, of fire minions they still have to deal with. So that's some presence that the Warriors will be able to show around the Fire Giant when it respawns. But I don't know. I'm looking at Nika. I don't care about anybody else anymore. I'm looking at Nika and what he's able to do. Because if he gets into the back line, if he gets into the Fire Giant pit, I think it's something that they could absolutely win for the Warriors, and they could get a Fire Giant, but otherwise
Twig,
it's slow.
blink, and there's the Tiger Form 2, knocking Twig
Good
down
damage.
to half health. The silence that came through actually caused Twig a lot of problems there, funny enough, but he didn't use his ultimate, and he didn't use his beads, more importantly, from Captain Twig. He just ate the damage and continues to survive, and the resustain could come through. Because at first I thought you would see Twig end up going back to base, but look at even Chiron coming into play there from Netroid to give a bit more sustain. And now Neilmar's wrapping round the back. I think they know he's there too, but all the while Nika's forced to defend the Phoenix on the left-hand side. and this is just opening the door for the Kings to get more aggressive at FG, but Neil is basically on an adventure here, trying to wrap around and not get picked off and allow his team a chance to get in this. Will Neil get spotted is the question coming into the pit. It's a 4v5, but really not much of anything. Fire Giant goes down. Neil couldn't make anything happen. He's going to fall back to base. The rest of his team now on the run, and it's Dardas and Vote sticking together with Variety giving chase here. He doesn't have Blink available, luckily enough, however, to continue and look for a pick.
And right Phoenix, left Phoenix, both halfway down. Seems like the Kings know that. This is
Right side,
Enhanced
yeah.
Fire Giant. They don't need any help to knock these down. And it's just one good fight away. Granted, they've been thwarted at this point twice now. So admittedly, this is a good spot for the Warriors in the sense that historically this game they've been able to defend it. It is not a good spot in any other regard. They're down in gold, they're down in presence, and with this Fire Giant, it's going to make things a lot more difficult to find a defense.
Here's the fight in mid. Nika has wrapped around the back and is unchecked right now. They don't know he's there. He's looking to terrorize the back line. It has been fruitful, but can they make it happen? Who's going to step up and tank up that Phoenix? That was the question. They're waiting for the minions on the left-hand side, and as soon as Gilgamesh shows his face, there we go. Neil blinks on in, tries to get some pressure going. Early curse donk as well. Nika now noticed in the backside, looks to knock up Detroit and does so. Has to cloud early on though. Not enough defenses to keep himself topped up. Now Nika comes slamming on down, and Neil's got his ultimate available, but he can't get anyone pulled into the Windsor Smash in time. Netroid gets the credit for the kill on Neil Mara, and now Nika soon to follow, and that could just be game, set, and match for the Camelot Kings. It's taken longer than you may have bargained for when you were voting here today, but this is damage done unless Cuvo can do the impossible, and the answer is no.
Yeah, that's just going to be a good couple of games. They end games there from the Kings, but really well played from the Warriors. They prolonged, like you said, that set a lot longer than I think most people would have given them credit for. 40-minute game early on, 35 minutes for that third one. Second one gets a little murkier in the middle because it was, 25 minutes, I think, or so for the Kings. I think they had a good presence from the Warriors, just not enough. And now, while it might not mean that the Dragons' Scarabs game, the Kings' Scarabs game is going to be more important, now there's a lot more on the line for the Warriors coming into, I believe, tomorrow going up against the Dragons.
We'll have to see how that one plays out, though, but that's it for that one. Kings end up taking it 2-1 after the Warriors at least put up a battle for at least the first game. We're going to go to a quick break, and after that, we'll break it down and show you the group standings.
Hey there, SMITE fans. Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce that the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true. I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240Hz monitors. Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality. We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's @Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Well, after a Game 3 win, if you're a Camelot Kings fan, you're happy. And if you're a fan of the color purple, I guess you're happy that you can buy one of the Camelot Kings jerseys now. Thanks to our apparel sponsor here at the SPL, that's Insight Apparel Company. Go to shop.smiteproleague.com. Grab yourself a nice purple jersey for the Camelot Kings, or I think the Oni Warriors have some of the coolest looking jerseys in the league as well. Despite a loss here today, still alive in the chase for the Phase 1 playoffs. So Insight Apparel Company, shout-outs to them for providing all the apparel, jerseys, hoodies, T-shirts, all that sort of fun stuff. That's shop.smiteproleague.com. And one final time, Taco joins me to break down what we just saw. And Taco, you set the stage, didn't you, in Picks and Bans? You're like, look, this Soul is going to have a hard time. It just doesn't match up well into what the Kings have drafted. And Vogt had a horrifically difficult game there in Game 3.
Yeah, his fate was kind of predetermined based off of that level 1 start. I mean, how many times have we seen it now where a little bit of an overextension takes place and Chiron hits level 2, and the next thing you know, you are getting giddy-upped to a side of the lane that you do not want to be on. Although it was an excellent recovery, I would say, from Neil Maw initially, because he didn't give up the double kill first blood bounty, but ultimately the pressure had already been established so heavily in the Chiron's favor. Netroid basically just getting to run rampant with that pick, and he wasn't the only one. The Daji also, I think, was criminal how much Captain Twig was able to just punish Dardes time and time again.
Well, Twig goes into this replay at like 3-2-2, gets a kill, maybe even a second one on the back end here. By the end of this game, and we'll get this confirmed by the post-game stats, Twig was getting very close to double-digit kills there in that game. So this Daji really start to hit its stride. Felt like a good matchup then for Captain Twig. And then back-to-back games, Genetics picks up this Terra. And look, we knew it was in Genetics' wheelhouse, but think about all of the pressure that the Oni Warriors put on Genetics in Picks and Bans. And to still have a pick like the Terra that you can fall back on and perform at a level like that definitely feels good for the Kings moving forward. 3-1-15 for Genetics. And then 8-3-8 for Captain Twig. And Variety quietly has been putting together an incredible phase so far. 4-0 on the King Arthur here in Game 3.
Variety for sure was a strong frontline member alongside that Terra, and didn't seem too shocking to me though on the Terra. If you can call back, Genetics, even since his minor league days, always been a bit of a beast with the Terra, and I think that it was ultimately just the fact that they had such a strong cage collapse. There really wasn't a whole lot of escape options. Neath already having such a predictable move pathway as well off of the backflip, and I think that was just extraordinarily well played by Twig. Just made sure to constantly apply pressure to that mid lane.
We're giving Twig a shout out there, and we'll give Twig a shout out in the post-game interview. Captain Twig joins me now to discuss all things games 1, 2, and 3, hopefully. Captain Twig, look, the first time you guys faced the Oni Warriors, it was a 2-0 for you guys. The Oni Warriors have obviously grown as a team, it feels like, since the first time. Is that something you would agree with?
Absolutely. The team that we played against today was night and day different from the team we played against 2 weeks ago, so they definitely fixed a lot, I think.
And I'm curious now, Taco and I had a pretty lengthy discussion about that Daji pick there in Game 3. You were able to pick it last overall. You got 8 kills. I think only died 2 or 3 times there in that game. Was that a pick that you knew just matched up very well into that Oni Warriors draft?
Yeah, Daji's obviously a weird pick where you can't just top 2 her or anything, but yeah, I kind of just felt like it was maybe not the safest pick, but the pick that I could be the most aggressive on into their comp.
Right. And these are maybe, the most important, not maybe, they are the most important games that you guys have played so far, the regular season of Phase 1. There wasn't all that much weight put on it, but now you're looking towards Phase 1 playoffs. The group stage is more important. How has the team kind of come together when there's more on the line? Have you seen good cohesion between the squad?
Actually, last 2 weeks have been a little bit rough. Especially last week, we're struggling a little bit in scrims, trying to find our footing. I think there's a lot of miscommunication, especially among the core. That's me, Genetics, and Big Man Tings. Right. So we're just trying to fix it before playoffs, basically, as long as we can make it there, which isn't guaranteed yet. So a lot to fix in a little amount of time.
Right, and then an all-important matchup then on Sunday against the Solar Scarabs is sort of what you're referencing there with your last point, and we look forward to watching you back in action then on Sunday. Captain Twig, thanks once again for joining me for the post-game interview.
Thanks, Dawson.
Yep. And so what he references there is very important here. So we're at a spot now, and we'll get to standings and all that sort of fun stuff here in a little bit, where Group B seems like there's still so much potential kind of down the stretch here, and we figured it would be this way. The Oni Warriors kind of on a surge, the Kings definitely starting to play better, the Jade Dragons up top, the Solar Scarabs, who knows what we get out of this team. So look at Group B over there on the right-hand side. Actually, Group A maybe in a similar spot there as well. But the Jade Dragons are 2-0. If the Oni Warriors somehow lose, or not somehow, if the Oni Warriors lose to the Jade Dragons, they'll be 1-2. If the Camelot Kings lose to the Scarabs on Sunday, the Kings will be 1-2. The Scarabs will also be 1-2. They've all beat one another. You're looking at plus minus. That's not math I'm willing to do sitting here right now on the desk. But things get interesting in certain scenarios in Group B, and the stage is potentially set for something similar over there in Group A as well. Here's the rest of the action that we've got going here. Leviathans versus Valkyries start off our day tomorrow. Jade Dragons versus Oni Warriors. Very important there as well for the Oni Warriors and the Dragons. We'll round out the day on Saturday. And the Camelot Kings, all-important matchup against the Scarabs, will round out the weekend here. But before that, the Olympus Bolts and the Tartarus Titans will go toe-to-toe. Taco, anything in the, 4 remaining matchups we've got here this weekend jump out to you?
Not particularly, although I will say, as far as the groups are concerned, I'm definitely seeing a little bit more kickback from the Scarabs than what I'm probably anticipating out of the Valhalla Valkyries. Group A seems a little bit more clear-cut as far as what the outcomes are going to be in terms of lining up the teams for those playoffs, but you never know what the both boys might be able to pull off. They have certainly surprised us, and they haven't been losing in a horrendous fashion, even when they've had poor showings in like a Game 1 or a Game 2. They've always managed to find that bounce back. It's been really fun, I think, watching this team kind of adapt to their set-by-set circumstances, and I'm really just looking forward to seeing what they show us against the Kings.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, any given Sunday is the old NFL saying where a bad team can beat a great team any given Sunday, and that might be the case for the Solar Scarabs, except they're not a bad team. They're a pretty good team here nowadays. A very important matchup, Solar Scarabs versus Kings, will round out the weekend in the SPL. But we got a great day of SPL tomorrow as well. Tune in before that at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the SCC, and then 1 p.m. Eastern Time the SPL will kick back off. So on behalf of myself, Taco, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.